So hey guys, how are you all doing? Let's start with second part of the series. The series name is What If Naruto Fall in Love with Female Gara? So let's start the series. She was very tired when she finally arrived home. Crossing the desert while she was over 6.5 months along in her pregnancy was definitely not a good idea, especially when no one else knew about it, and she was trying to convince them she was doing well, so she couldn't take it easy. She had managed to stop Naruto from forcing her to take either a clone of him or Sakura herself with them. At least, it had been very hard to talk him out of those ideas, but at least no one was suspicious of her. Well, they weren't too suspicious, maybe avoidant was the better term. No one tried to confront her, though she saw people staring at her more than once. When she arrived home, the first thing she did was lie on her bed and curl up on her side, hoping her back would stop hurting any time soon. At least her sister had stayed in Konoha. She was usually the only one nosy enough to come check on her randomly. She was tired, nauseated and in pain, but after several minutes lying down, she still managed to fall into a dozing state. After her eyes closed, she could swear she felt Naruto's hands on her stomach, gentle, warm. With a small, contented sigh, she fell further asleep even as she felt her pains ebb away slowly. Gara? Her body froze at the voice. She felt like someone had poured iced water over her when she was jolted awake, and the pain in her back returned as she tensed. You were asleep. You didn't notice me. It wasn't a question. She winced and struggled to sit up. What's it? Did something happen? She watched her brother in concern. Kankuro looked very worried. Yes, my insomniac, control freak little brother allowed me to sneak up on him while he was asleep at 2 in the afternoon, Kankuro remarked, crossing his arms. Gara grunted, annoyed. I'm just tired. If you have nothing important to say, leave. She sagged back on the bed and closed her eyes. My Kazekage is ill. That's one of the most important and grave things that could have happened. Kankuro pulled on her shoulder, watching her sternly. Why haven't you seen a doctor yet? I don't need a doctor, Kankuro. I'm not ill. I'm just a little tired, Gara grumbled, once again sitting up. Kankuro was incredulous. A little tired? You look terrible, and you were asleep. He stressed the words once again. You're not irresponsible, Gara. So, why are you doing this? Why are you going through all the trouble to keep this a secret? Kankuro paused. After a few seconds he hesitantly asked, Are you dying? Are you trying to keep your death from burdening? No! Gara huffed, interrupting him. Kankuro, just drop it. Nothing is wrong, she insisted. Then at least stop lying and tell me you're taking care of yourself. Kankuro watched her with narrowed eyes. Gara pressed her lips thin for a few moments, then she sighed. I have this under control, and I'm taking care of myself. I'll be all better in 6 months, she promised. Giving in to his insistence, Kankuro seemed to become even more unhappy. Can you at least tell me why you're sick? I'm your brother. I should be by your side, supporting you. Gara looked away, and remained silent. The silence hung heavily between them, until Kankuro gritted his teeth and broke it. TCH, fine. Do you need more water? Gara nodded slowly. I'll bring you something to eat too. Once Kankuro was gone, she groaned and buried her face on her pillow. That had gone well. She felt guilty. Now, she hadn't wanted either of her siblings to feel like she didn't trust them, but with this, she couldn't. Kankuro returned half an hour later, with a jug of water and take-out food. This time, Gara was aware of his presence as he crossed the corridor. She moved to sit at the small table near her window when she realized he had brought food for himself, too, and waited for him to join her. Her brother set the table in silence, but she could see there was something he wanted to say. She didn't prompt him. She waited in silence for him to speak his mind. Gara, I'm sorry you can't tell me what's going on, but won't you let me help you? You've been really tired lately. Why don't you take it easy and have me do some of your tasks instead? Gara studied him silently. If I share my workload with you, people will ask questions. She noted he looked angry at her answer, but not with her. Let them talk. You've got nothing to prove to them. You're human, Gara. And every man needs a break every once in a while. No one can begrudge you that. She stared outside her window, silent at his words. Kankuro had spoken those words often, since they were young adults. Really, you have nothing to prove, but she had been trying to prove to people she wasn't a monster since she was 14. She had probably already managed by now. Why was she still trying so hard? I don't want people to know I'm not at my best, she explained quietly. Strategically speaking, that wouldn't be good. It's too late for that, Gara. Everybody who works close with you knows something is going on. You're acting so suspiciously that they're already expecting the worst." She turned to him, startled. He had believed she was on her deathbed. Did other people believe that too? Why hasn't the council brought up any concerns? She wondered. Kankuro's smirk was grim. "I doubt they know. The people who have noticed are shielding you." "You didn't notice?" It was more of an affirmation than a question, but Gara nonetheless shook her head, hesitant. "People think you're dying, Gara. I'm not the only one who came to that conclusion. You're trying too hard to hide the fact you're ill. It looks like you're trying to avert a crisis." Gara sighed silently. If worst came to worst, she might die attempting to give birth on her own. She couldn't give him any guarantees on that aspect. Kankuro seemed to read as such in her body language, because he looked even unhappier. When she refused to say anything else, he didn't insist on trying to find out what was going on. Instead, he lightened the subject, and started talking about his friends and training. Gara relaxed, silently thanking him for the attempt as she joined him in eating. After her conversation with Kankuro, she started noticing how people were treating her. She was being shielded, indeed. Not only was she getting less paperwork than usual, only on matters that required strictly her attention, but she noticed her secretary was lying about her presence in her office when she was feeling unwell, redirecting visitors elsewhere. She felt honored and loved by her people. It was a nice feeling. Both Naruto and her began to prepare their counsel in order to propose their marriage. She had managed to convince her friend that being patient was the best approach, instead of being blunt in an attempt to garner people's support as Naruto had first suggested. As the month passed, her stomach grew. She was thankful she had given up any pretense of hiding it, because by now, it was frankly impossible to do so. Her clear weight gain was met with perplexity and worry by her ninjas, but only the council confronted her on it. She adopted evasive tactics to deal with them, but at that point, she lost any enduring hope that her true gender wouldn't come out. When she presented her heir to the council, some people would draw conclusions. She would be disappointed with their intelligence if they didn't. Naruto had been trying to convince her to allow them to know sooner rather than later, so her health could be monitored honestly, though she didn't let him know from her tone of voice. She was beginning to agree with him. Still, her life would fall apart if other people knew. She couldn't deal with it at the moment. After she gave birth, at least she wouldn't be feeling so sick and tired anymore. Naruto would be able to help her care for the babies then, and she would deal with everyone else and their reactions. She had been developing other clear physical symptoms lately, shortness of breath and chakra control issues, both of which were expected symptoms. According to books, she was always so tired and in pain, which were common as well. Her siblings had insisted she start taking walks with them every day around the village, because Temari was still keeping her from training, and they thought she was getting worse because of lack of exercising. She rarely could hide from them when she was having trouble breathing. They were in one such walks. Gara enjoyed walking by the park. Truth be told, she didn't have good memories of that particular park, but watching the children carefree, running and laughing, made she feel as if she had accomplished what she had set out to do. Her people felt safe enough for it to reflect on their children. Safe. She saw it, the flash of steel from the corner of her eye, near a man she could feel had chakra too powerful for a civilian. The power level of a chunin. She had just a few milliseconds to react to the man's offensive, but she made it. She turned around and stared right into the ninja's eyes as he grabbed one of the running children by her arm and held her throat at knife point. Her siblings hadn't noticed it before. They reacted too late, but they were tense and ready by her side seconds before the civilians began to scream. "Naruto Uzumaki, come with me peacefully or this kid won't go back to her mother alive." The child began to cry, and Gara saw a desperate woman that looked like her from the corner of her eyes, her mother. As her ANBU began to push back the civilians, she made a sand clone to take the woman aside, to the back alley where her daughter was safe and sound. After being replaced by a sand clone of herself once Gara had realized the man's intentions. "Naruto isn't here, you've got the wrong village, man," Kankuro told him, his eyes narrowed, ready to use his chakra strands to grab the child at the slightest mistake from the foreign ninja without any village marking. He hadn't seen Gara change the child for a clone. No one had, it seemed. Gara really wanted to know how a chunin of below-average chakra and reflexes intended to kidnap the Hokage. Just thinking of that, she could tell something really bad was about to happen, and she expanded her senses to her sand, trying to see if this was an ambush of some sort. She paled when she felt sealing ink on the floor around them. Yuzushio came immediately to mind. When she connected the seal usage and Naruto's name, Ha! He might be fooling you, but our sensor isn't fooled by genjutsu. He can smell the stink of Uzumaki's blood from miles away. The ninja pressed the knife harder against the child's neck. So, be a good boy and come along. Tell your monkeys to back away, too, or with a single hand seal, made by the hand still holding up the knife. Everyone tensed as the floor under their feet lit up with purple runes. I'll activate this nice seal, and your tailed beast will be freed to rampage over this quaint village, the man mocked. Your sensor's mistaken, Naruto isn't in Suna, Gara told the man patiently, though her heart sped up inside her ribcage. Was that man really capable of sensing Uzumaki's of sensing her children? The second man, a blonde, had a blank, expressionless look on his blue eyes, and most of his face was covered by a cloth mask. His eyes looked familiar. She was certain she had seen that man somewhere before, but she didn't recognize him with the mask on. Isn't he? The man with the hostage laughed. Riki, show us where Uzumaki is. Everyone was tense as the blue-eyed man's hands flew through hand signs so quickly they could barely see, let alone react. Gaara's sand felt restless around her, but her sand couldn't defend anyone from the bright light that washed over everybody in several meters radio. When she managed to open her eyes again, her stomach was emitting a faint, reddish light which alarmed her. She was also alarmed because she had felt her children start inside her, and to her concern, they became agitated. The expressionless man, Riki, was completely lit up in a bluish-white light, down to each of his fingers and toes. He showed no reaction to her, but the other ninja was staring at her stomach, befuddled. What the hell does that mean? He demanded, looking around. No one else was shining. Unborn child with Naruto Uzumaki's DNA. The man's voice was expressionless and sounded mechanical, loud in the tense silence around them. Gaara froze at his words. The silence that stretched seemed to last forever. Gaara realized that the only leverage the man believed he had, control over Kurama, it seemed, was now gone, and she recognized the desperation in his eyes. Gaara acted quickly. She dissolved the sand clone in his arms and trapped him with the sand before he could react. He cried out a command before her sand covered his mouth, and his colleague flew up to the sky somehow. She didn't hesitate, jumping onto her sand and following him post-haste. Gaara, don't! She heard Kankuro cry, an edge of panic in his voice. A sense of déjà vu hit her then, and she remembered her fight with Deidara. Unlike Deidara, Riki wasn't trying to take her down, he was fleeing. Just like Deidara, however, he seemed to be fond of explosions. Once she was close enough to him to make a grab at him with her sand, the man simply exploded, as if he had been a bomber clone all along. Her sand reacted instantly, shielding her of all but the deafening sound of the surprisingly great explosion. It almost caught a section of her village, but her sand encased the houses and protected them. Her children became even unhappier. She rubbed her stomach in an unfruitful attempt to calm them down. She peered out of her cocoon of sand to see the man was completely gone. Only then, with her ears still ringing, she allowed her protection to dissolve and returned to the park where her siblings and several ANBU were now standing with the captured ninja. By the looks of it, he had tried to kill himself with some poison known by her ninja, who were now working to neutralize it and keep his life for interrogation. Are you crazy? Why did you fly after him on your own like that? Kankuro demanded when she jumped on the floor, patting her shoulders and looking her up and down, trying to find injuries. She pursed her lips at him, but she knew Kankuro had never really recovered from the trauma of her fight with Deidara, and even she could see the parallels, so she didn't tell him off. What's the man's condition? She demanded of her men, ignoring her siblings. One of the ANBU, a kunoichi, saluted her. Kazekage-sama, he attempted suicide, but the poison has been neutralized. We're healing the damage made, he will live. She was one of the only people who was making an effort to pretend she wasn't staring at the light shining from Gaara's stomach. Gaara self-consciously placed her hands over her stomach. Her children still seemed to be feeling distressed. Their movements were a lot stronger than usual, but they were getting too sparse for her liking. She needed to go to a doctor. She had researched names for such an emergency. She hoped she would find one of the doctors on the general hospital today, take him to interrogation and find out why he's after the Hokage. Until I personally tell you that he's to be sent to Konoha as their prisoner. Treat him as a S-level prisoner of Suna. Yes, sir! She saluted again. Gaara turned to the other ANBUs. Put the village on a level 3 lockdown. Make sure there are no more spies. Sir! 3 of the men saluted, then they were gone. Temari, contact Konoha and inform them what has happened. Her sister's eyes narrowed as she stared at Gaara's stomach. Gaara wrapped both arms around her midsection defensively, muffling most of the light. I meant now, she finished strongly. You've been keeping us in the dark for months, Gaara. You're telling us what's going on. Now, her sister snapped just as strongly, her voice just as deep, as she stood straight, staring right into Gaara's unblinking eyes. The ninjas who were still around them seemed to hold their breaths as they stared each other down for several seconds. There's no point, you have already guessed it. Gaara finally said, yes, I'm pregnant, now, informed the Hokage. Before they realized their mistake and attack him in his own village, Temari gritted her teeth, and her eyes promised silently this conversation would continue later. Kankuro, get Gaara to the hospital, now, I'll meet you there later, Temari ordered him. Then she was gone in a wisp of sand. You're how? Kankuro stared, eyes wide. Did Naruto create some funky jutsu that did that? Gaara closed her eyes, feeling her head throb. She should have thought of a lie, anything, but lying now would have made everything worse, especially since her babies would soon be known by the very people who stood around her. She was also worried about them. She needed to have a doctor ensure they were all right. We're going into a level 3 lockdown. You should be securing the Kazekage compound, she told him pointedly, ignoring his half-baked question completely. Hell, no, I'm getting you to the hospital. Now, are you really? Kankuro's eyes widened. Wait a second. How long have you been pregnant? All this time you've been sick and avoiding doctors you were? Gaara just stared at him, her jaw set. Gaara, he exclaimed, scandalized. You should remember well the night I conceived. Her voice was biting. Kankuro paled, and his mouth worked open and closed for several seconds. She turned her back to him and strode down the street towards the direction of the general hospital. Her ninjas stood and saluted her as she passed. She felt sick and exposed. She was also somewhat relieved. Her people's reaction so far was respectful, if shocked. She wasn't being called a liar, she wasn't being scorned, no one was doubting her identity. How long would that last? Why, you were drunk. What did Naruto do? Kankuro caught up to her. Gaara closed her eyes, making an effort not to cover them. Nothing you haven't done with other women several times, I'm sure, she hissed, well aware her ninjas were probably using all their eavesdropping techniques on them right at the moment. But you're not a woman. Naruto couldn't get you pregnant without doing something different. Gaara said nothing. Gaara? Her brother sounded desperate. Probably realizing what her silence meant, she ignored him. Oh God. She stopped walking when he grabbed her arm, and her sand didn't stop him. Kankuro stood in front of her and scrutinized her face. You're a woman, he sounded doubtful. Gaara pried his fingers off her arm. Why did you hide that? How? Your documents. Father registered me as male. By the time I was old enough to know better, I couldn't care less whether people treated me as a boy or a girl. Then when I was 15, I was already too embroiled in his lies to undo them. There was no easy way to rectify his mistake. She looked away. It was the truth and not. If she was completely honest with herself, she would never have been able to garner the respect and reputation she had if people knew she was a woman. She would never have become Kazekage. And she had promised herself she would. She hadn't tried hard enough to correct that mistake because of that. Damn it! Why did father fuck everything up so badly with you? Kankuro cursed, grimacing. It doesn't matter now, he's dead. She turned around and resumed walking. Damn it, Gaara, why didn't you tell us when you realized you were pregnant? Were you just going to tell us when you were giving birth? Her brother caught up to her quickly. No, I was going to pretend someone else bore them, she told him honestly. And how do you suppose you would give birth? Under a genjutsu? Kankuro scoffed. I've trained myself to do it on my own. Her brother looked scandalized, then, his face became blank, and his hand closed into a fist. Gaara, she ignored his whisper. They were already arriving in the hospital, and several people were staring at her. Gaara had covered her stomach in sand so the light would stop showing through. She needed several layers. But she managed to hide the light. The sand over her midsection was quite clear to see, however. She didn't attempt to hide it as she was feeling unwell, and it was taking a lot more effort than it should to keep the sand in place with her poor chakra control. Kazekage-sama! One of the attendants exclaimed when they arrived at the front desk. Are Drs. Sasaki or Mieko currently on duty? She inquired politely. The woman quickly checked her computer, then directed them to Dr. Mieko's office. It was empty. Gaara let herself in and laid down on the examination table. Because she was starting to feel dizzy, Kankuro was still silent. She couldn't read his expression. Gara jumped into a sitting position and both of them tensed when someone suddenly materialized in the room with a gush of wind. Naruto, she gasped, touching the pendant her friend had given her. Remembering it existed, her heart sped up so suddenly that it left her panting for breath. Gara! I heard just now what happened, are you okay? All of you? Naruto walked up to her and ran a hand over her forehead, then rested it on her stomach. Were you shining? They still are, she corrected him, allowing all the sand to leave her stomach, including her armor. The light shining through only her clothes was much brighter than before. Gaara's eyes widened when Naruto unzipped her jacket and lifted her shirt, baring her stomach. He didn't seem to realize Kankuro was there in the room. Staring at them it was extremely awkward, at least until Naruto gasped, "Is that a foot?" And she gaped at her stomach. With her skin bare and no sand so refract the light, she could see the outline of her children through her skin. Where she could feel some pressure, there was the outline of 2 tiny feet. Though one of them was barely visible, Naruto caressed her skin gently, then actually pushed his fingers against the foot, dislodging it. The baby moved, pressing its feet harder against her skin for a moment, and causing her to wince as whatever they did, they also pressed painfully against her kidney. They were probably stretching. The other baby moved as well, and a small hand outline showed on her stomach for a moment, before all outlines became shapeless and undecipherable. Wow, Naruto breathed, and she had to agree with the sentiment, almost involuntarily. Her finger traced the spot where the small hand had pushed. Is this jutsu dangerous? Are they okay? I'm in a doctor's office to inquire exactly that, she sighed. I don't think it is. It seemed like a locating jutsu, however, and from what I understand, it was meant to locate people from your family, so, be careful about it. She looked at her friend with concern. I'm being careful, don't worry, I'm already dealing with this. Naruto wrapped his arms around her and rubbed her lower back. Gaara laid her head against him and closed her eyes, enjoying the impromptu massage. You're a shadow clone? She asked for confirmation to her suspicion. Yup, I promised I would be by your side if this happened, remember? Gaara swallowed thickly. He had said he would support her if people learned of her true gender. But, we haven't explained to our councils our involvement yet, she pointed out quietly. Naruto snorted softly. By tomorrow, the fact we're having a kid together will be all over Konoha and Suna. Trying to be subtle is pointless. You need me. She did. Naruto ran a hand over her hair. You're shaking. But Temari said you didn't get hurt in the battle. It wasn't much of a battle. They were expecting you to surrender. Gaara frowned and looked up at him. Serious. They seem to have a way to free Kurama, or so they believe. Temari described the seal to me, and I've seen it before. It would have screwed me up back when Kurama wanted to overpower me. But now that we have a bond, all it does is help me draw his power all that much easier. It was much like falling asleep for you, back when you had Shikaku. They both looked up when there was a knock on the door, and only then Gaara remembered Kankuro had been in the room. He had left at some point, and they were both alone now. Gaara tugged her shirt over her stomach as Naruto went up to the door and opened it. He made quite a sight in his Hokage robes, and the doctor was startled to see him. Hokage-sama, Kazekage-sama, she bowed politely. Naruto blinked, then with a hand sign, his robes were gone and he was in his more usual orange and black coat, wearing a burnt orange shirt and maroon pants. Only Naruto is fine. You're here to check on the babies? Naruto wondered hopefully. The doctor looked askance at Gaara. I haven't told anyone yet, Gaara mumbled to Naruto. I told her everything I know already, Kankuro remarked. You're a woman, you're pregnant, and that asshole used a sensing jutsu of some kind on your kid. His eyes narrowed. Did you say babies? Yup, they're twins, Naruto agreed cheerfully. I checked on them with senjutsu just now, and they're alive and strong. But I can't tell anything else. So please, he waved towards Gaara. Can you lie down a little, Kazekage-sama? Gaara nodded slowly and laid on the examination table, pulling her shirt up again. As she began examining her, her empty Jinchuriki seal lit up, making her stomach shine even more. The babies seemed unhappy with all the lights, and they were making her miserable as well by pressing all the wrong places. The frown on the doctor's face was not very promising. Is something wrong with them? Naruto worried. The children are healthy. This jutsu doesn't seem to have any adverse effects on them. There was a but there. Gaara narrowed her eyes as the woman hesitated to continue. I'll ask for a second opinion. To be completely sure, Please don't leave the bed, Kazekage-sama. She bowed quickly, then left in a rush. The atmosphere in the room became heavy. Kankuro crossed his arms over his chest, looking grim. Something is wrong. I told you should have visited a doctor when your health worsened, Gara. You're ill? You didn't? Gara cut through Naruto's question. I'm fine. Sakura Haruno examined me, she explained to her brother. Kankuro pursed his lips. I wasn't aware Haruno knew anything about pregnant women, he told her pointedly, knowing very well that wasn't her specialty. Why didn't you tell me? Naruto asked forcefully. I'm not worse than I was before I visited you, Gara said quietly. Are you trying to fool us, or are you trying to fool yourself? Her brother asked darkly. I can make you a list of reasons why you're worse, your headaches would be right on top. People get headaches all the time. I lived with them in my childhood, Gara scoffed, glaring at him. But you haven't had anywhere as many since Shikaku was gone. What does that tell you? Kankuro snapped. They're just headaches, Gara dismissed again. Arguing about this is pointless. At least you're going to a proper doctor now. She shot a look at Naruto, feeling a little betrayed by the relief in his expression. He had kept his promise not to tell anyone, but he was too happy it had come out. Wait! You knew about all this, and you didn't make Gara see a doctor? Kankuro glared at Naruto. Naruto smiled nervously. Well, Gara's stubborn, he mumbled. Naruto's been badgering me almost as much as you and Temari. Gara sighed loudly, lying back down and closing her eyes. Her headache was getting worse. She relaxed when Naruto's warm hand rested on her forehead, and he gently caressed her hair. Do you have a headache now? Naruto asked in a quieter voice. That's a given. He almost got blown apart by those assholes, Kankuro growled. What? Gara said there wasn't much of a fight? Naruto was alarmed. There wasn't. The ninja was fleeing. He exploded when I caught up to him, she corrected, before Kankuro blew the story out of proportion. He flew away, and Gara followed him on his own, just like he did when he faltered, just like she did when that bats hit insane Akatsuki dude with the bombs came. One would think she would have learned with the experience, Kankuro finished bitterly. It's my duty as Kazekage to protect Suna from invaders, no matter the risk to my own life. Her brother glared at her, his arms falling to his sides and his hands fisted tightly. You are Suna, Gara. You have high-ranking ninja to protect your life, because your death would destroy Suna. Fucking use them. Stop shielding Suna with your own body. That's reckless and stupid. Kankuro's eyes narrowed. Trust us, he finished strongly. Gara tensed, then closed her eyes once again, and said nothing else as guilt washed over her. Well, Naruto began awkwardly. Maybe we should calm down, HM? Gara heard Naruto whisper something so faint she couldn't distinguish. He was probably mouthing something to Kankuro. I'll get us tea, Kankuro snapped, then left the office. Naruto let out a heavy sigh. Naruto moved his hands until both of them were cupping her temples. The room beyond her closed eyelids lit up, and his hands became warmer. Gara opened her eyes to see Naruto was communing with Kurama, and using sage chakra. His pupils looked like crosses and he was shining bright golden. Naruto? He smiled as she sighed. Whatever he was doing, it was heaven. It was soothing her headache. He was probably healing her. Her quick heartbeats slowed down in her chest, and the discomfort she had been feeling slowly ebbed away. After a while, it seemed even easier to breathe. She didn't know how long they stayed like that. At some point, she closed her eyes again. She even dozed for a while. But her eyes immediately snapped open when the door opened. Dr. Mieko had returned, along with Dr. Sasaki and another Dr. Gara didn't know. Kankuro trailed into the room after them. It seemed he had given up bringing tea. The three of them looked apprehensively at Naruto until he stepped away and returned to his normal state. I was just soothing her headache. Were you healing him, her, Naruto-sama? Dr. Mieko walked up to Gara and placed her hand on her bound chest once again. You did heal her, she concluded with a sigh. Shouldn't I have? Naruto wondered, his eyebrows raised. Have you healed Gara-sama before? Dr. Sasaki asked sternly as the other doctor moved to cup Gara's temples, after a silent request that Gara accepted with a nod. If she needed healing, yeah, why wouldn't I? Naruto took offense. Have you healed her after she got pregnant, Naruto-sama? We just need to know if she was in a worse condition before, Dr. Mieko quickly explained as Dr. Sasaki moved to examine Gara's stomach, once again. The experience was unpleasant, especially with another doctor examining her brain. He hasn't. No one healed me of anything in the past months, Gara responded for him. Worse condition? What's wrong? Naruto looked between them, dismayed. What's your diagnostic, Takeru? Dr. Sasaki asked as soon as the other doctor's hands lifted from her temple. There were several injuries, healed at different moments. Naruto-sama seemed to have healed several of them right now, but a few were healed less than a day ago. Longer than that, I can no longer tell. But it seems like Gara-sama's own body was healing them before. If there was no one else, it's surprising she hasn't suffered seizures yet. Dr. Sasaki turned to Dr. Mieko. Serious, you know what has to be done. You're one of my best students. I doubt you ever had any need for a second opinion. This has clearly advanced to the last stages. She closed her eyes and nodded. She stepped forward, her expression grim. Kazekage-sama, your life's currently at serious risk. You're suffering from an ailment of pregnancy, and the only cure is immediate delivery of the children. Gara felt her stomach drop, and Naruto's hand squeezed hers convulsively. I'm not feeling ill, she told her faintly. You certainly are, Dr. Sasaki told her with pursed lips. With your chakra control as low as it is, you must be able to tell. Low chakra control is a symptom of pregnancy. She trailed off when the first doctor shook her head. Not that low, along with your high blood pressure, that's a sign of mother-child circulatory disorder. It's a deadly disorder. We will have better chances of saving your life once you're no longer pregnant. Not much else can be done. Gaara's eyes narrowed at her words. Chances? What are the chances I'll survive after termination of the pregnancy? She demanded, her voice raspy. The doctors looked uncomfortable, and she knew they weren't good. They didn't say anything. Considering the clear ineffectiveness and violence of this treatment, I refuse it, she snapped. Her eyes narrowed. Whether Gara survived or not, her children weren't physically mature enough to survive yet. I don't see why there's need for such a harsh intervention when I'm not even having symptoms. She looked between the three doctors. Dr. Mieko hesitated, and Dr. Sasaki crossed his arms, annoyed. She interrupted him before he could say anything. You are having symptoms, Kazekage-sama, she began, quickly cutting him. Your body seems to be healing itself of most of the damage caused before you can acknowledge it. I would have believed it was caused by the one tail. But she trailed off. Shikaka was gone. He couldn't heal Gara anymore. Gara hadn't been damaged often, so she couldn't compare her healing rate before and after Shikaka was gone. The idea it might have remained the same was intriguing. If my body is healing, I don't see why we should rush labor. I'm surviving, but my children won't. That's exactly it, Kazekage-sama, you're surviving, but we don't know why, and this might change at any moment, quite literally. You're at an extremely high risk of suffering a stroke or a chakra system failure while your pregnancy is affecting your chakra and blood circulatory systems. Chakra system failure can't be healed by any technique we know, and depending on the location, a stroke might kill you too fast for intervention. Dr. Mieko explained quietly. Dr. Sasaki crossed his arms and stared Gara down. Think it through, Kazekage-sama. If we let this go on, all three of you will die. But you still have good chances of surviving if the fetuses are removed through surgical incision, Dr. Sasaki explained to her. She glared at him. If he was saying good, instead of giving the numbers she had requested, she doubted they were any good. Even if I accepted this, doing as such is impossible, considering my sand shield, Gara reminded him. All three doctors seemed surprised. You'll be sedated, one of them began. My shield would still keep you from cutting into my flesh. Even if I was awake and actively removing the shield, it would likely still be impossible. Not even I can consciously damage myself with a knife to the extent of cutting open several layers of my skin. She corrected their assumptions. The three doctors exchanged glances, some silent message passing between them. We can induce natural delivery, then. This is an even stronger reason for us to do it now, before you become too ill to survive the physical stress of labor. If we're unable to aid you with surgery, Dr. Sasaki trailed off, and the grim silence that issued weighted heavily over all of them. I still refuse, she said quietly after a long silence. Naruto squeezed her hand almost painfully. Gara, his voice was raspy. Gara turned to him with a frown. The babies are too immature to survive outside of my womb, Naruto, she explained to him. The three of you will die if you insist on this foolishness. If you terminate the pregnancy now, you'll have a chance to get pregnant again later, and if you're responsible with prenatal care next time, it likely won't come to this situation once again. Gara bit her tongue to keep from telling Dr. Sasaki quite bluntly what she thought of his opinion. Isn't there another way? Kankuro interrupted them before Gara could say anything. Can't you keep monitoring her and treat her until the children are a bit older, or something? This illness is only manageable while it's only affecting the blood circulatory system. Once it evolves to affect the chakra circulatory system, trying to maintain the pregnancy is too dangerous to both mother and child. Even if we wait, it's more likely than not that delivery will result in a stillbirth, Dr. Mieko explained grimly. In the long experience we have as doctors, allowing this pregnancy to continue is gambling with your life without any purpose. Kazekage-sama, Dr. Sasaki stressed her title. It's a gamble either way, if we're dealing with chance, she remarked, crossing her arms. Your condition is caused by the fetus's placentas. Once they are removed, you'll be cured. There's no gamble there, Dr. Sasaki corrected her. Gara could read the other doctor's expression, however, and she realized he was lying. There's something you're not saying. She watched him with narrowed eyes. I'm the doctor, you're the patient. It falls to me to understand your condition. You don't have the training to understand it. Gara bristled, and to her surprise, something that hadn't happened in several years happened then. Her sand reacted adversely to her feelings and started hissing out of her gourd despite her conscious effort to contain it. Her poor chakra control was probably the reason. Listen, we have your medical opinion. How about you allow Gara and me to talk about it and decide the best course of action, Naruto asked nervously, as all the people standing in the room looked at the sand cautiously. Great idea, Naruto. Kankuro quickly grabbed the two male doctors and pulled them out of the room. Let's go. The female hesitantly followed. After some shuffling and whispered arguing, Gara and Naruto were alone in the room. She tensed when he tried to hug her, but a few seconds later she relaxed into his arms and placed her hand against his chest. Naruto held her closer. I'm sorry, Gara, Naruto whispered against her forehead. I'm really sorry. He was crying. Gara hesitantly wrapped her arms around Naruto and held him closer, trying to comfort him. You've already given up on them, she noted quietly. You're an important. Naruto's voice disappeared. He cleared his throat, but he didn't continue his sentence. Naruto had never believed in sacrificing anyone for the greater good. I don't want to lose you, he finished in a whisper. He sounded afraid. Gara closed her eyes, a bitter smile turning her lips. I should have made you see a doctor. His voice was faint. There was nothing she could say in response, so she remained silent. Naruto's arms tightened around her, and she held him closer when a single sob escaped his lips. Both of them stood silent, holding one another. Gara felt strangely numb as she stared at the wall across from them, listening to Naruto's hitching breath. It was as if a cycle had come to a close. She had been born killing her mother, and she would die birthing her children. It was fitting, in a morbid way, so long as her children survived. Tsunade is coming, Naruto whispered against her ear. It was the only reason she wasn't startled as another clone of Naruto materialized with the former Hokage. Tsunade sighed heavily as she saw them. You're always getting yourself in trouble, aren't you, brat? She remarked grimly, looking straight at Naruto. Gara hesitantly let go of Naruto to have a better view of her. By that I mean, getting into a romantic relationship with another Kage, she explained, eyeing them both. We weren't together, this was an one-time accident, Gara told her quietly. She rolled her eyes. It doesn't matter, the brat told me what happened, and I agree with your doctor. You'll have better chances if you give birth now rather than waiting. Gara, she pressed her lips. It's nonetheless a gamble, and I would rather make this gamble once our children actually have a chance of survival. Gara politely turned down her advice. You're 7.5 months along. If your children are healthy, they have a 90% chance of survival outside the womb. Their odds will only get worse if your own health becomes impaired. She looked startled at her former colleague. 90%? Where did you get that figure? Tsunade motioned with her hand. It's a statistic from our newborns, our main hospital keeps them. Gara looked up at Naruto, and he averted his eyes from hers. So he had brought Tsunade here to convince her to take the medical advice. In Suna, children this young have a 30% survival rate. Tsunade's eyes widened and she exclaimed a loud profanity in surprise. Maybe children with lung problems have better chances in Konoha. By all means, come to Konoha, then. I'm not lying. Tsunade took from her pocket a page with Konoha information Gara likely shouldn't be privy to. So that was how she had this information off the top of her head. She had actually hunted for these statistics when Naruto asked it of her. They were from a census of 2 years previous. Gara was surprised to see they had high survival rates for children as young as 6 months of gestation. And she really was interested on knowing how they managed that, in Suna. If a child was born before 7 months, they had no statistically relevant chance of living. I can't just go to Konoha like this, she whispered, reading all the numbers listed on the page. Their general statistics of mother mortality on childbirth were a lot lower than Suna's. She wanted to know why. It really bothered her that her village's hospitals were clearly inferior when it came to childbirth. And that was something she had never realized. It was something that had to be changed. She had already lowered infant and child mortality during her rule. She wouldn't have the time. On the paper, women with her condition had 60% chance of survival. Considering the comparison of all the data she did know from Suna's hospitals, her chances in Suna were likely lower than 50%, possibly much lower. With a difference of 60% in your children's living chance? You bet you can. Those kids are our Hokage's kids, too. Konoha's council certainly won't complain, and I doubt Suna's will complain. Considering those are their Kazakage's kids, Naruto's hand squeezed her shoulder. Let's go. I can take you both back to Konoha, Naruto told her in an anxious rush. You can't just kidnap me like that, Naruto, Gara told him weakly. For a moment, she thought Naruto really would just grab her and leave. He gladly didn't. Though, as the day continued to get worse and Gara had to deal with people from her council, she wished Naruto really had kidnapped her. Naruto was holding her hand again. Gara glanced at him from the corner of her eye as he chatted with Kankuro over breakfast. Yesterday, Naruto had been all over her, holding her hands and hugging her in public. She believed it had been from the sudden scare. Or maybe he was taking very seriously his promise to be by her side when people found out about her. She had been too shaken to have a complaint about it yesterday. She was starting to feel really uncomfortable now. When she felt him run his thumb over the back of her hand, she pulled her hand from his grip and stood up. I need to go to the toilet, she told him when he looked askance at her. That was a place he didn't follow her in, so she locked herself in the room and stared at the mirror. She didn't look good, she was very pale. Her skin almost had a greenish tinge to it, but no one but her could see it, because her sand armor kept that hidden. She did look tired, with her eyes bloodshot, but she didn't think it was enough for anyone to fret over her nearly as much as Naruto was. Naruto had seen she hadn't slept. The shining jutsu on their bodies had kept her babies awake and active, and in turn they hadn't allowed her to fall asleep even once. She tensed when someone knocked on the door. You okay in there? A silent sigh of relief escaped her lips when she heard Temari's voice, instead of Naruto's. I'm fine, she replied loud enough to be heard. She ran wet fingers over her eyes to soothe them. She didn't look like she had bags under her eyes because her birthmarks hid it, but her eyelids certainly were feeling dry and scratchy. Does that mean I'm fine, or I'm dying and I won't tell you? She blinked. She reached for the door and opened it. Temari was standing there with her arms crossed, looking defensive. I'm fine, she repeated again. Some of Temari's defensiveness left her body language. You didn't look it when you left the table. Is something the matter? Gara licked her lips. Naruto's acting odd. Temari frowned, and she was surprised to note her sister couldn't tell what was different about him. Haven't you noticed he's always touching me now? Temari started at that. The cat's out of the bag now. There's no real reason for him to hide your relationship. If you don't like PDA, tell him, she pointed out. Gara frowned. What's PDA? Public displays of affection? You know, something he has always done with his girlfriends. I suppose he's been more clingy towards you, but that's perfectly understandable after yesterday. Her sister's tone became darker. Looking back, Naruto had been affectionate in public. Hinata was the person she could remember best, as Naruto had been with her for longer, and whenever she saw them, they had been holding hands, or he had been holding her waist. At least during the first year of their relationship, Naruto had been in love with Hinata, though he was only friends with Gara, albeit with a lot of physical benefits. A very bad feeling settled in her stomach. Gara? She looked at her sister again. It's nothing, she told her quietly, then walked back to their breakfast table. Temari followed her close, and both Naruto and Kankuro ran their eyes over her when she returned, as if making sure she hadn't acquired any wound on the way to the bathroom. She wasn't sure what to feel about their overprotection. She brushed it away. Naruto caught a hold of her left hand as soon as she sat down, and her sister gave her a pointed look. After breakfast, she asked to speak with Naruto in private before she left to deal with the world outside her family's living quarters. She turned on him as soon as she closed the door of her bedroom behind them. Are you in love with me? The cornered look that took over Naruto's body language immediately was more than enough response for her, a satisfactory denial. Before she could say anything, however, he composed himself and placed his hands on her shoulders. Why yes, her eyes narrowed. Why are you lying? Naruto tensed and laughed nervously. Lying? Me? She only stared at him, until he sighed. You're going to be my wife, so I fully intend to fall in love with you. I just need a bit more time. Naruto, no, don't do that, he looked confused. I don't want you to get more attached to me. Don't you start forcing yourself to. She pushed his hands away from her shoulders. Why not? If we're going to be together, and you love me, why don't you want me to love you? By the way his eyes darkened as he asked her, she was pretty sure he already knew the answer. It was a very hard answer to give, too, so she didn't. Just don't, she finished in a whisper. Naruto's expression became strained, and they were both in silence for a long time. Naruto's eyes softened, then she saw he was about to give her a hug, and she quickly dodged him. I have a council meeting, she said quickly, striding out of the door. Naruto rushed after her and grabbed her wrist. She froze, and waited for whatever he was going to say, but time passed, and he said nothing. She heard a sigh come from his lips. He walked up to her and slid his hand down her wrist until he was holding her hand. Lead the way, he prompted in fake cheerfulness. She really should pull her hand away from his. She really should push him away. She didn't. Gara had taken to wrapping a thick dark brown scarf around her stomach to muffle the light coming from it. It made her stomach look much bigger, her weight gain even more obvious. People weren't even trying to be subtle when they stared at her anymore, which was why she was surprised no one seemed to know she was pregnant. People don't know, she murmured as she walked with her brother towards a council meeting Naruto wasn't allowed to attend. Kankuro glanced at her. Everyone who was there yesterday was sworn to secrecy. She frowned. She hadn't ordered that. So, she wasn't surprised to learn it had been an order from the Council of the Elders. We've analyzed and discussed the proposal made by you and the Hokage this morning. By vote of majority, we accept your marriage and alliance contracts. Gara could hear a but there, so she sat patiently and said nothing. We don't accept your request to give birth to your children in Konoha. Are you trying to kill her again? Kankuro snapped loudly, slapping the table angrily. She reached over and held his wrist tightly, silently telling him to be quiet. You have statistics of infant mortality rate of Suna and Konoha. Under the current circumstances, what was your decision based on? She asked calmly, studying the representative they had chosen to speak their decision. You're our Kazekage. While you're suffering such a grave illness, we can't leave your treatment in the hands of another hidden village. Gara wasn't surprised to hear that. We can't leave your children there unattended in case of your death. Konoha are our allies, we should be able to trust them. It was Temari who argued, her voice also calm but firm. Not with the life of our Kazekage and his children, the man said firmly. Unless this new alliance takes immediate effect, our alliance currently doesn't enable this sort of trust. Gaara's eyes narrowed. In their marriage contract, Naruto and her had left clearly written that half of their children were going to be ninjas of Suna, and half of them would become ninjas of Konoha. Her council was aware she was expecting twins. If they were making such a demand, they were probably attempting to secure one of the twins for Suna. She should have made a clause saying Naruto would keep them both in case of her death. Too late now. She needed to ask Temari to ensure no one would try to take Naruto's children away from him. So, you're saying you'll allow Gara to go only if she marries Naruto? Kankuro asked with narrowed eyes, ignoring her grip on his wrist. It seemed he had taken the man's slip on her gender as more than a simple slip. He was right. Yes, that's another change we wish to make. The final contract drawn should state Kazekage-sama is male, and not female. Gara tensed. Why? There's no longer a reason to keep this a secret. I have explained the initial circumstances of my deception yesterday. She had told them her father had been the one to ask her to uphold the lie, but she had never learned why before his death. That caused nearly everyone to accept her deception, as she had expected, not because they respected her choice, but because they respected her father's judgment. They couldn't tell she was lying, because it had been Raza who had registered her, and she would have been incapable of lying about her gender as an infant. None of them knew there had been an illusion over her that kept Raza from knowing the truth. She also told them her father no longer cared what she did after he began to send assassins after her. From there on out it became her choice. I no longer wish to pretend to be a male. We have discussed this at length. Your chances of dying are high. In case of your death, letting all of Suna's people know of your real gender is unnecessary trouble. Gara pressed her lips into a thin line that felt like a slap on the face, but it wasn't unexpected. There was a reason why she kept her secret for all these years. That's ridiculous. Kankuro growled at her side. Very well, I'll change the contracts, she agreed. Kankuro's hand squeezed into a fist. She sent her brother a sharp glare. She cut through her brother's complaint. That's the most irrelevant detail in this discussion. More relevant is, once the marriage contract is signed, then I'll be allowed to give birth in Konoha? She asked firmly. Yes, that's the agreement we have reached. Once the alliance is solidified, then you may go. Gaara's mind darkly changed the word go for die in her thoughts. She definitely needed to make sure both of her children would be safely in Naruto's guard. She pulled on Kankuro's hand when she felt his arm begin to shake inside her grip. Since we are already taking precautions in case of my death, I will also make clear to this council who will succeed me as Kazekage. Everyone looked alert at her as she removed from her pocket the official document she had made with her heir's name. She had taken hours to write it last night, because Naruto kept trying to stop her from doing it. My heir will be my sister Temari. Through her marriage with Shikamaru Nara, she will uphold the alliance promised by my marriage with Naruto Uzumaki. She set down another marriage contract by it. Temari looked at her with shock. She hadn't spoken with her sister yet. Naruto hadn't spoken with Shikamaru either. They didn't have any time. But her sister's marriage contract had already been drafted and corrected numerous times, and both Gaara and Naruto had the latest copy. She would probably get an earful from Temari for making her Kazekage, but she doubted her sister would refuse. That's not the wisest choice, Kazekage-sama, one of the elders began. She cut through his words. But it's my choice, she will succeed me, she told them firmly. The only way for a Kazekage to be replaced by anyone other than their heir would be for this other person to win against the heir in a battle. Temari was one of the best ninja in Suna, and the few people who Gaara knew could best her wouldn't challenge her for the position, because they would respect Gaara's choice. There's nothing else left but to wait the decision from Konoha's council. This meeting is dismissed, she told them as she stood. They refused again, she guessed when she saw Naruto's clone shake with anger by her window. Without any apparent reason, he had been standing there for a while. She was sitting on her bed, exhausted but unable to sleep, trying to read while she was kept awake by her moving children. Their kicks were very painful at the moment. Screw them. Let's just elope, Naruto offered once again, as he had several times that day, since his council first refused their marriage. The sun had just set not long ago. No, she told him firmly. With Temari and Shikamaru, it had always been the other way around. Suna's council were the most eager to refuse any offers, and Konoha reluctantly accepted several of the contracts. But it wasn't like she didn't understand. Had she been in Naruto's council, she likely wouldn't accept his marriage, knowing that he had high chances of becoming a widower as soon as he married. Why not? We don't have time to waste on, he began angrily. Going behind their backs now will only bring you grief later, she tried to reason with him. I'll deal with that later, she frowned. No, sit, calm down and think it through. A single bad decision now would earn you their enmity for the rest of your rule. She stood from her bed and set the book she had been reading aside, walking up to him. They can hate me all they want. Naruto choked on his words, surprise replacing the anger as he stared at her. Gaara looked down at her stomach, and when she realized something looked off, she carefully unwrapped it. She was relieved to see the lights were gone. The jutsu's finally over. It took over 2 days to fade. She rubbed her stomach. She felt weak movement from the babies, but they were likely beyond exhausted. They would probably sleep the whole night through today. That was good. Maybe they would allow her to sleep tonight. She really needed the sleep she was being deprived of for nearly 3 days. The lights had kept them awake, and their nearly constant and painful kicks were keeping her awake as well. The lack of sleep was affecting her mood, especially coupled with Naruto's impatience and Kankuro's anger with Suna's council for hiding her gender. Kankuro was trying to convince them to accept Gaara's gender, and he was trying to convince her she should insist, or maybe just go behind their backs and declare herself a woman. But she didn't care if people knew at this point. The council was right. It would never matter to her, and it would likely cause a huge backlash she wouldn't even be alive to deal with. Anyways, I don't care what they think of me. It's your health I'm worried with. Naruto's words were far more subdued as he turned away. She frowned, her heart getting heavier as she watched him turn away to avoid looking at her stomach. Naruto hadn't touched her stomach even once since they left the hospital, It was unusual, and it was starting to worry her. You're not blaming our children for my death, are you? Naruto tensed, her hands curled into fists. Don't you dare, Naruto. No! First of all, you're not dead, he said firmly, walking up to her and shaking her shoulders. Stop acting like your death is a certainty. You're alive, and you're going to be fine. But if I do die, you'll blame them? She studied him, eyes narrowed. Of course not, he looked away. You're lying. She pushed his hands away, angry. I'm not going to blame them. It's not, he exclaimed, frustrated. It's not their fault. Then why have you been acting so cold towards them? He buried his fingers in his hair. I don't know, you're ill. And it's because I don't want to make you feel used. Her anger deflated so quickly it left her feeling hollow and even more exhausted. I don't feel used. I'll feel better knowing you'll love them, than thinking you're going to blame them for my death for the rest of their lives. She took his hands and placed them on her stomach. Naruto closed his eyes, pained. You're not dead, damn it, he growled, letting go of her stomach to hold her close. She tensed inside his arms. You're not going to die. Stop trying to push me away. Stop trying to get closer to me. You're so stubborn. She pushed him away, trying to get out of his embrace. Naruto just held her tighter. I'm the stubborn one? He snorted. You don't even listen to your siblings anymore. She felt too weak, with all the stress and lack of sleep, and she was tired of pushing him away. She just sagged inside his arms. Naruto shifted his hold and held her closer, running his hand over her hair. She just wanted to sleep. Where Naruto began, but he interrupted himself with a sigh. Never mind, they're quiet now, and you're tired. Let's go to sleep. We'll talk tomorrow. Don't be harsh, Naruto. She had meant to word it as a warning, but she just sounded weary. How can I be harsh, with you and Kakashi holding me by the ears? Naruto muttered. She didn't say anything. Come on, time to sleep, he told her firmly, walking towards the bed and forcing her to walk along. She tensed once again. You're not sleeping with me, she told him. Yes, I am. Get to it, Gara grimaced, but she allowed him to push her until she was lying down. She tensed when he spooned her, but relaxed when he placed his hands on her stomach and started rubbing it. Sleep, he whispered against her ear. I can't just fall asleep because you want me to, she muttered. But now that she was comfortable in the bed, warm inside Naruto's arms, she felt the urge to sleep overcome her. She couldn't even understand Naruto's reply. When he realized she was nearly asleep, he created a clone to turn off the lights and cover them with a sheet. She closed her eyes and listened to his breathing. Naruto wasn't saying a word, probably so he wouldn't keep her from sleep. She was asleep in minutes this time. No one woke her until she woke up by herself. When she woke, she felt like she had overcompensated and she was fatigued from sleeping too much. She didn't want to get out of the bed, especially since Naruto was so warm. She loved it about him. She could never get enough of his warmth. She turned around and buried her face against his chest. Naruto was awake, but he said nothing, and didn't try to tell her she should be awake. He only ran his fingers over her hair and let her be lazy. I told you no, she mumbled. After a long while, Naruto didn't even bother to answer her. She sighed and closed her eyes again. She put off getting up so long that she ended falling asleep once again. She's still asleep? She heard Temari whisper. You've just woken her, Naruto muttered back, sounding annoyed. She opened her eyes and glanced at her sister. Is something the matter? Her voice was slurred. I had a meeting, didn't I? She remembered, biting back a groan. That was hours ago. I took over for you. They had nothing important to say. Temari pursed her lips, looking annoyed by whatever her counsel had been up to. But you have an appointment with Dr. Mieko in an hour, she started at her words. Her medical appointment was scheduled for 2 in the afternoon. It's already past noon? She struggled to sit up. Naruto sat up and pulled her up with him. Yes, you need to eat something. You've already skipped breakfast. Temari watched her in concern. You haven't eaten either, Naruto. Shadow clones don't need to eat, Gara mumbled, rubbing her eyes. But he isn't a shadow clone. She tensed and looked up. Naruto had a flush on his cheeks, and looked like a kid caught with his hand inside the cookie jar. How would you? His eyes narrowed. Shikamaru's a busybody, he finished with a mutter. Next time, tell your shadow clones to pretend they need to go to the toilet every once in a while, Temari told him with a raised eyebrow. Naruto huffed. You should be worried that your future husband is noticing how many times I go take a piss, he mumbled under his breath. Temari didn't hear, because she was talking at the same time. I brought some takeout so you can both eat. go to your appointment, then come home and rest. I've taken your workload for today. I'm already delegating all my duties so I can cover for you during your maternity leave. Thank you, Temari, she said in a tired voice, bowing her head to her sister. Temari offered her a small smile. She placed the food on the small table she had near her window. Kankuro and I have everything under control. Just worry about getting better soon, alright? She hesitantly nodded. Once her sister was gone, she turned and glared at Naruto. She could see the bags under his eyes as he scratched his head and offered her a sheepish smile. He looked so sad and exhausted. At least you should have slept, she ground out. Instead of saying anything else that could cause them to fight, she didn't want to argue with him anymore. You didn't even eat anything last night. I got a kind of bread thing in the market yesterday. It tasted weird, but it filled me up, he shrugged. Did you have breakfast? She stood up slowly, because she was feeling dizzy. No, I didn't want to wake you up. You really needed that sleep. Gara sighed and rubbed her face. You can use my toothbrush if you want. I doubt we have any extra around, she muttered, then left to wash her face. He followed her. What happened to not getting closer? He teased. She didn't say anything to him. Kazekage-sama, I'm not sure I made it clear how important it is that we induce you soon. It was one of the first things Dr. Mieko said to her after examining her. Yes, you have. But I'm sure I made it clear I'm not risking my children's lives. As soon as I can go to Konoha, you can induce labor, she told her firmly. If you want to be treated in Konoha, you should go soon. You should have already left. It'll take almost a week for you to arrive at a reasonable pace, Dr. Mieko admonished. I can't leave yet. If I leave as it is, I might be accused of abandoning Suna. So we need to wait. The doctor pressed her lips, but at least she seemed to understand the problem this time. Have I gotten worse? Yes, luckily your children are still unaffected, except in the fact they're a bit small for their gestational age. Naruto was still uncharacteristically silent by their side, but she felt him tense at the doctor's words. But you're not healing yourself as well as you were before. That might indicate some strain I'm unable to detect. If she's just not healing herself, will she be alright if I heal her? Naruto asked, breaking his self-imposed silence. The problem lies on the reason she isn't healing herself as well as before. Her chakra pathways are probably getting more damaged. That's something we can't easily detect. Chakra circulatory system failure is fatal, and if she miraculously survives it, she'll lose her ability to mold chakra. Gara went cold at her words. If she survived, but was forced to become a civilian, what was she going to do with her life? At least a forced retirement would solve very nicely the logistic arguments that would no doubt start once Naruto and her were married. They would just stay in Konoha permanently. That wasn't a cheerful thought. The longer we wait, the more likely some of this damage might become permanent, the doctor insisted. Once she realized Gara was concerned by her words, you might become weaker, or your chakra control might become permanently flawed. You need to go to Konoha soon. This is out of our control, she told her grimly. Naruto sent her a look, but he said nothing. He was probably avoiding an argument with her. It was nice to know he was as sick of them as she was. We're doing our best to rush the process along. Yes, I'll rush things along, Naruto agreed cheerfully. I'll have Gara there by the end of the week. She shot him a wary look. Traveling at a punishing pace will only worsen her health. Dr. Mieko shook her head. She can't use her chakra to travel. In fact, Kazekage-sama, you need to stop using your chakra at all. Not even to jump, or climb places. You should stop carrying sand around. Gara frowned. My shield is unconscious, and the sand follows me, whether I'm carrying it or not, she explained with a shake of her head. Well, limit its use the most you can then. Don't get yourself in dangerous situations. Don't make use of it consciously. The least you use your chakra, the slower the disease will progress. That meant she couldn't use her armor anymore. She wearily nodded. Naruto placed his hand on her shoulder and squeezed it. I have a way of getting her there quickly without straining her. Don't worry, she'll be in Konoha before the week ends. That's a promise, Gara tense. Naruto raised hell and moved mountains to keep promises. She wasn't sure she was happy with him for essentially telling her he was going to go over his council's decisions if he couldn't convince them. It definitely didn't bode well for the start of his rule as Hokage. That night, she slept inside his arms again. She even allowed him to kiss her, and kissed him back. She spent a long time listening to his breath as he slept, feeling guilty at her for giving in to his insistence to hold her close. She didn't want Naruto to get hurt. Naruto was a stubborn mule, though. He had always been, It was one of the defects that made him into the man she admired, but at the moment, she despaired of it. The babies were moving too much, and even if she could sleep through a kick or another every once in a while, she couldn't sleep through that. They had already regained their energy from the scare. She was thankful for that. Eventually, they quieted down, and she managed to sleep. She woke up to Naruto pulling her shirt up, and watched him askance as he stared down at her naked stomach. Naruto? What? Look, Naruto whispered. She hesitantly looked down, but she didn't understand what he was seeing of unusual. After several seconds, Naruto pouted. Ah, your voice must have scared her, he mumbled, fondly rubbing her stomach. Gaara felt relief wash over her and relaxed as she saw the fond look on Naruto's face. So, he was finally over whatever the reason he had been avoiding her stomach. He had probably seen the baby move. She had been seeing it lately, the subtle rise of the skin when a baby kicked. She felt a strong kick, and Naruto was delighted. Look! Her eyes widened as she saw her skin move with the baby's movement, and a sizable bump appear at the top of her stomach, much bigger and glaringly obvious compared to what she had seen before. Naruto reached out and grabbed whatever appendage their child was trying to poke out of her stomach. The baby kicked out, and the very shape of her stomach once again changed for a few seconds. Does it hurt? Naruto wondered as she grimaced. No, it's just creepy, she muttered. I can barely feel it. It's probably kicking its sibling to get leverage instead of me. Naruto laughed. Poor kid, it looks like we're looking forward to a little taijutsu master. Bushy brows will be delighted. That called her attention. Does he know? She asked quietly, wondering what Rock Lee thought of the fact she was a woman. She didn't speak with him as often as she spoke with Naruto, and it had been over 4 months since she had sent her last, unanswered letter, but she valued her friendship with him very highly. Naruto shook his head. Rock Lee left on a sudden training trip. Back in mid-August, he's scheduled to return by the end of February. Gaara was startled at hearing that. He hadn't said anything about it. She had assumed he was in a mission last time she visited Konoha, over a month ago, at the beginning of November. Naruto grinned. I know. Suspicious, isn't it? He looked like he was trying to run away from something. But Kakashi let him go anyway. Tenten keeps coming into my office to ask how he's doing, because apparently he isn't sending letters to anyone but the compulsory updates. Gaara was concerned. Is he alright, I wonder? Well, I suppose you're his friend, so it's okay for you to know. From what I got off Tenten, it seems a woman rejected him. Naruto's smile was subdued as he offered. Oh, she felt disheartened for him. At least training must be distracting him from the heartbreak. He wasn't the kind of man to go after his friends for comfort when he needed it. But other than my counsel, Tsunade and Kakashi, I haven't told anyone anything about you. I can help you tell people if you want, but I thought that's something you should do, Naruto said almost absently. Far more interested in her moving stomach, he poked her again, and their child responded by shoving harder against her skin. I think the twins shifted places. That's probably why they were moving so much last night. The twin that was making her stomach deform with its movements was probably the one making her feel pain by kicking her internal organs before. It was the culprit keeping her awake at night when they were both shining. But its kicks didn't hurt anywhere as much now, as bad as they looked. She's eager to come out. We've got to teach her that's not the right way out. Naruto giggled. Gaara blanched, not at all amused with his joke. You wouldn't be saying that if you were in my place, she muttered, feeling sick. I'll stop. Naruto leaned in and kissed her lips. She accepted his kiss. But he didn't look sorry at all, still grinning in amusement as he watched his child move. That was definitely a mini Naruto in there. When the other twin moved, it was far more subdued. She didn't feel pain, though she could tell it had moved. They definitely changed places. I hope they stay like this. It doesn't hurt nearly as much. She sighed. Naruto laughed. She pursed her lips. Must be tough to be a mom. This time he did sound apologetic. Her expression softened. I guess your counsel's plan to hide your pregnancy just went out the window. Unless they find a really good explanation for this. Gaara groaned. Don't say that she was already getting grief for not managing to hide her stomach anymore. She was probably going to be forced to lock herself inside her quarters if the baby continued to move like that. The baby had stopped moving, but when Naruto poked it, it kicked out, and the bump on her stomach remained for far longer than a few seconds. She rubbed it until the baby relieved the pressure and her stomach once again looked normal. She should probably warn Naruto off, but she was so relieved that Naruto was happy with their baby once again that she allowed him to play with her belly to his heart's content. She only stood off the bed once the baby was too tired to react to Naruto's goading anymore. Let it sleep a little. You can play again later, she murmured, then she stretched to try and relieve her back pain. Okay, mommy, Naruto agreed cheerfully, standing up and kissing her again. This time, the kiss became far from chaste. She was breathless once they parted. I have a meeting, she mumbled, but she didn't move to walk away from him. Naruto noted it, and he seemed even happier than before. So do I. I'm going to do some stuff while you're busy. I'll come back for you later. He pecked her lips once again before he disappeared. She stood there, silent, for a few seconds. Then, she sighed and left to get ready for her day, trying not to feel lonely without Naruto after a few days of having him always by her side at the moments she was supposed to be alone. 2 days later, she wasn't feeling any worse than she had been even a week before. If not for the whole fiasco with the Uzushio ninjas, she wouldn't even know there was anything wrong with her health. Her doctor still told her, daily, that she was playing with fire by allowing the time to pass. She wasn't allowing anything. She felt so stressed that she had given in to Naruto's insistence, and just let him comfort her. He healed her every day, too, because she was still not healing herself like before. Something she hadn't known, doctors measured pregnancy in lunar months, so all their months had 28 days. That meant she was actually 8.5 months along, and not 7.5 as counted in normal months. That extra month gave her children over 90% chance of living in Suna, and about 95% chance of living in Konoha, both lower than normal because of her condition. The difference between Suna and Konoha's statistics was only abysmal at the earliest months. 9 months was a turning point for her, because a woman's chakra was the most unstable on the last 4 weeks of pregnancy, and each day after that her chances of having a complication, of giving birth to stillborn children, would increase. Her chances of remaining alive would also decrease each day. Her current living chances were higher. They were actually 85% at the moment. But the average survivability was dragged down by women who only gave birth next to the 10th month. In Suna, her living chances were the same, but they would drop to 0 on the last week of her pregnancy, and that dragged down their average lower than Konoha's. As women, there still had over 35% chances of survival if they gave birth on their due date, at the exact 10th month mark. She didn't understand why the doctors were so hesitant to give her the numbers earlier. Dr. Mieko still acted suspiciously, refusing to answer some of her questions. That made her believe her treatment wasn't as straightforward as they were trying to make her think. She could easily accept induction in Suna, considering these changes of circumstances. But now she was afraid Naruto would be unable to get their children away from Suna in case of her death. She wanted him to raise them, and not whoever the council thought was best. They were his children. She was getting ready to sleep that night when Naruto suddenly exclaimed, startling her, "Gara!" He had been sitting by her window, staring at the darkening sky in an odd silence that she had taken to mean he was communicating with one of his clones. "What?" she asked, walking up to him. Her eyes widened when he ran up to her and lifted her off her feet spontaneously. "Konoha Council's accepted the contract. We're getting married tomorrow," he announced cheerfully. She was surprised, but she remembered well his promise. She wondered how much grief he had put his council through to get that victory. Oh, the word was barely past her lips before Naruto kissed them. Gara kissed him back hesitantly. "You're not happy?" Naruto asked breathlessly as they parted. Gara licked her lips. "Naruto," he frowned at her tone. "You're not going to ask me to stop getting attached to you again, are you?" He pulled her into his arms. Gara sighed and held him back, moving until her stomach was somewhat accommodated between them. "Are you going to listen if I ask?" she asked in a murmur. "No," his voice was firm. "I thought we were past that." Her words were cut off as Naruto placed a finger over her lips. "Stop!" Naruto took a deep breath. "Listen, Gara, you don't have to worry if you die. I'll crash, I'll cry and I'll grieve you, but I will still be alive to gather the pieces and move on. I'll be fine, if you die. This is all the chance you will ever have to experience this, so let me love you, let me be a good partner to you, please." Gara squeezed her eyes shut, feeling them burn with unshed tears when she heard his voice crack from his pain. "Very well," she whispered so gently that for once she sounded like a woman. Naruto's hug became so strong it felt painful, but she didn't complain. "Good." Naruto's voice was also somewhat high-pitched. "We'll get married tomorrow morning, and I'll take you to Konoha. We already have a medical team ready, and like you asked, Dr. Hime will share her leading duties with Dr. Mieko." "Okay," she agreed, before she could say anything else, and Yon interrupted her. Naruto offered her a sad smile. Let's sleep, you need rest. It feels like sleeping is the only thing I do anymore, she muttered. For someone who had been used to sleeping 5 hours every couple of days, sleeping 8 hours per day felt like a waste of time. Naruto chuckled weakly. Come on, we'll have plenty of sleepless nights in a bit if our babies inherit your insomnia, Naruto joked. His words left a heavy feeling in her chest when she realized that was it. If they were getting married tomorrow, the day after tomorrow they would induce her. Natural labor would put a lot of strain on both her heart and her chakra. There was a real chance she wouldn't survive. Even with her raised odds, she knew Naruto hoped she wouldn't die. But if she was truthful with herself, she didn't expect to leave the experience alive. A sense of foreboding had settled in her chest since the day she had learned she was ill. Gaara? You don't look well, are you okay? She looked up at Naruto. I'm just feeling nausea. Her tone was dismissive, but Naruto still was worried. Should I take you to the hospital? She scoffed, and offered him a faint smile. Stop freaking out and hold me. She pulled him by the hand towards her bed. Naruto spooned her, as it was the most comfortable position for them to lie in each other's arms. She loved being held by him. It was a bit surprising that he didn't toss and turn at night. When he was holding her, she settled against him and closed her eyes. What do you think we'll get? A boy and a girl? Naruto wondered, caressing her stomach. Gaara hummed. I hope not. We would do a terrible job raising a girl. As it was, they were both very much men. Even if she was born with the body of a woman, Gaara was terrible at being a woman. Rubbish, any woman you raise will be an awesome woman. I hope at least one of them is a little girl, Naruto confided. Is that why you keep calling it her? Naruto only hummed by her ear, but she guessed he was agreeing. I'm going to buy her tons of pretty, orange dresses, he continued, as if she hadn't said anything. People would know she was your daughter from miles away. You wouldn't want that, she remarked, but there was a smile on her lips. I'm going to get her an orange coat written the 8 Hokage so people will be sure. He rubbed her stomach when the baby began to move, trying to soothe it so she could sleep. Sweet dreams, Naruto, she said quietly, feeling sleep coming. Dream of our daughter, Naruto whispered by her ear, and she fell asleep smiling. Their marriage was nothing more than a council meeting. Naruto and Gaara had worn their offices' formal robes and signed the contract in front of her whole council, and after a somewhat lengthy meeting, Naruto had taken her, her sister and Dr. Mieko back to Konoha with him, leaving a clone behind to keep them updated. Kankuro was left as the standing Kage while Temari was with her. They repeated the process of the marriage signing in Konoha, and this time Sakura, Kakashi, Tsunade and Hinata had been standing there, supportive of Naruto. She wasn't bothered by the lack of ceremony, but he was, and he had promised her they would have a proper ceremony once their babies were older, and she was feeling better. She had expected the doctors to give Naruto and her some time to be together, but she left the Hokage Tower straight to Konoha's General Hospital, and in less than an hour she was connected to several tubes and wires, forced to stay in place so they could monitor her and the babies. She was wearing loose clothing that accommodated the devices. Hinata had the foresight to buy her maternity pajamas that consisted of a very loose shirt that opened in the front and a wide, long skirt. They were very comfortable, too. Her gourd had dissolved by her feet and was in constant state of unrest. She was coming to learn her shield acted out when she was around most doctors who came to examine her. Dr. Mieko, Tsunade and Sakura were the only exceptions so far. It acted specially vicious around Dr. Hime, because Gaara disliked her, and she didn't seem to enjoy Gaara's company very much, either. At some point, one of the nurses came to remove the belt they had wrapped around her stomach to monitor the babies. Dr. Mieko arrived soon after he left, wheeling in a machine of some sort. I'm going to take a look at you to see if there's something wrong we might be missing with the usual scans. Naruto stood and looked at the machine curiously. What's that? An ultrasound machine. It's not often used, because chakra exams are more thorough and accurate, but we will be able to see their size and how they're positioned, as well as a few other things. Are you wearing your sand armor, Kazekage-sama? No, she replied quietly. The doctor covered her lap with a folded cloth. Lift up your shirt, then, to expose your stomach. Gaara silently complied as she started turning on the machine she had brought. She returned and spread a warm gel on her stomach, then pressed the device against it. She did the exam and they remained in silence for several minutes, until Naruto interrupted her. Wait, is that the baby? he asked. Awed, Gara turned her head to the side, but she couldn't see what Naruto was seeing. Yes, it's one of the twins' head, it's already in the right position for birth. Naruto's eyes widened. Dr. Miyako typed something in, then turned the screen around so the three of them could see it, and moved the wand, in the screen, in shades of red and cream and with little detail, was the clear outline of an infant. He had his fists cradling his temples, and was loosely curled up. It's a boy, Gara murmured, her eyes wide. Eh? How can you tell? Naruto squinted. Look between his legs, she pointed out, and Naruto's eyes widened, the baby shifted, and then they couldn't see his sexual organs anymore. She felt him move even as she saw it. He was the twin that moved so much that he changed her stomach's shape. Let's find his twin. The doctor moved the wand, and while she focused the image, Gara could actually see the child's internal organs, the beating heart, when there was just the outline once again. The other baby was curled up tighter, sucking on its thumb. She couldn't see anything at first, but the doctor moved the device until they saw it was another boy. 2 boys, thankfully. They're both well positioned. Naruto made an indistinguishable sound by her side. Awed, the doctor let him stare at the screen for a while. The baby seemed asleep. He was moving a little every once in a while, but she couldn't really feel it. Dr. Miyako turned the machine off and cleaned her stomach. That's it. We'll return to examine you when we need to change your medicine, in about 6 hours. Gara didn't ask if there was anything wrong. She could read the doctor enough to know there was. But Naruto hadn't really been paying attention. He had been watching the screen. She just asked, "Are they healthy?" "Yes, Kazekage-sama. A chakra exam can tell us that better. They're very healthy." She sounded sincere. Gara relaxed. As soon as the doctor left, Naruto squeezed her hand. "So, 2 boys, what are we naming them?" She glanced at him in silence. "I want you to give them both names." "I don't know," she murmured. Naruto grinned. "Well, think about it then." She didn't want to name them, but she hesitantly nodded. Maybe Naruto would forget about it later. The minutes went by fast. She was tired of lying down, and her back hurt because she couldn't stand and walk around due to all the wires. But she felt none of the symptoms she had read that she should expect during labor. She only felt tired and listless after an hour had gone by. Naruto didn't leave her side once. He was talking with her. Even when she stopped paying attention to him, she told him his voice soothed her, and he was more than happy to hold a monologue for her. She started feeling a strange feeling she couldn't describe all over her body as she watched Naruto caress her hand. It wasn't pleasant, but she couldn't describe it as pain either. "Gara-sama?" She started, and looked up to see Dr. Miyako watching her in concern. Dr. Hime stood just behind her, a stern expression on her face. She hadn't even noticed them walking into the room. "It's already been 6 hours?" Her voice sounded slurred. Naruto squeezed her hand, and she glanced at him, concerned to see him looking anxious. "Less than 2, you're not responding well to this treatment. We'll have to try something else," Dr. Miyako explained patiently. "She'll keep burning through anything we inject in her bloodstream." Dr. Hime shook her head. "We should try topic application. Her shield doesn't allow internal intervention." Dr. Miyako responded quietly. "She can rub the gel in, herself, if no one else. Hokage-sama clearly has access into her vagina." Naruto choked by her side. Gara blinked. "Shouldn't we wait until her chakra is once again stable?" Dr. Miyako wondered. "No, this will take too long as it is. She should be fully recovered by the onset of labor." Dr. Hime disagreed. "Kazekage-sama, can you understand us?" she asked sharply. Gara could, but she didn't respond immediately. The doctor didn't wait even 2 seconds before turning to Naruto. "Hokage-sama, she's too out of it. You'll have to rub the gel inside her." Naruto shrunk into the chair by her side. "I can do it," she slurred after a few seconds, when Naruto said nothing. Dr. Miyako leaned in, staring into her eyes. "We should allow her to recover before trying anything else. I'm worried about her slow responses." It sounded more like a decision rather than a suggestion. She placed her hands on her temples and Gara closed her eyes as the doctor soothed a headache she hadn't even realized she was feeling. "If we pause at every failed procedure, she'll reach her due date before she gives birth." Dr. Hime didn't sound very happy. "We should try manual dilation first. Her chakra won't be able to fight that," Dr. Miyako suggested. She was wrong. 3 hours later, Gara was on antibiotics because her sand had involuntarily gone up her birth canal to push out the stick they asked her to put inside. The doctors made sure to sterilize all of her sand once they had cleaned and medicated her. The sand was hissing by their feet as Dr. Mieko examined her. She's clean, she announced, turning off the antibiotic strip. Good, we're going to try chakra induction now. Dr. Mieko stepped away from Gara, looking unhappy, but saying nothing at all as Dr. Hime walked up to her and continued to explain. The procedure's a little painful, but your body's leaving us no alternative. You say that as if it's my fault, she couldn't help but retort. Her eyes narrowed. She had already recovered her attention, and she was far more alert when the doctor placed her hands on her naked stomach. Dr. Hime made to say something, but she glanced towards Naruto, and whatever she saw there made her quickly lower her eyes and shut her mouth. Gara turned to the side so she could see him. Naruto's expression was deceptively calm, almost blank, but he smiled at her when their eyes met, squeezing her hand which he had been holding for a while. Take a deep breath and relax, Dr. Hime instructed her. Gara took a deep breath, but she tensed when the doctor's hands started to shine and she felt a sharp pain on her navel. Her shield immediately shoved the doctor away, and her ninja reflexes were the only reason she remained on her feet. I couldn't stop that, she explained before the doctor told her to control herself once again. She was far from apologetic. Dr. Hime was rubbing her the wrong way. Gara only truly felt sorry for the bruise her sand had left on Dr. Mieko's arm earlier. You'll have to try harder than that, Dr. Hime said sternly, if you're not ready to take this seriously. Maybe I could try it. Her shield's response has been less violent against me, Dr. Mieko quickly interrupted, walking up to Gara and placing her hands on her stomach. The pain she felt was nowhere as strong. It was a faint throbbing, and this time her sand only pushed the doctor's hands away instead of shoving her whole body back. She fought against it, until the doctor was able to rest her hands on her stomach once again with only a layer of sand between their skins, and the procedure once again took effect. Gara was only able to maintain control for a minute, then Dr. Mieko jumped back to keep herself from being shoved away. Gara's shield retained an alert appearance, floating in the air between them. Gara pressed her lips. You're too stressed, Kazekage-sama, you should rest. We will attempt this again tomorrow, she concluded with a shake of her head. Dr. Hime didn't look happy with her decision. They didn't argue in front of her, but she was sure they would argue once they left. That was why she wasn't surprised when Dr. Hime returned 2 hours later, after they had had dinner. We'll start you on another medicine overnight. We won't come into the room so you'll have the opportunity to sleep, but that means we'll have to keep more monitors on you for the night. If you feel anything unusual, press the nurse call button. She silently agreed, though she inwardly wished they would just let her sleep. Not that she thought she would be able to sleep. She felt a little jittery tonight. The 2 night nurses came in and placed more monitors on her temples and her hand, and the sash that had been on her stomach earlier was once again wrapped around her. She couldn't stand up without dislodging all the wires. Even lying down was uncomfortable, especially when the nebulizer mask was placed on her face, and she couldn't even turn on her side without feeling uncomfortable. Be careful not to dislodge the mask during the night. I'll leave you to your rest. You should leave too, Hokage-sama. Visiting hours were over a long time ago. The doctor looked towards Naruto. Gara suddenly felt vulnerable, and she glanced at him. I'm staying here tonight. Naruto's tone of voice brooked no argument. She'll be more comfortable if she has quiet and peace. Dr. Hime tried to argue. Naruto turned towards Gara, as if gauging whether the doctor was right, then turned towards her again. That's too bad, she already looks uncomfortable enough. A little more discomfort won't really matter, right, Gara? She gave him a faint smile when he weakly smiled at her. Hokage-sama, I can't force you to leave, but the doctor began, but Naruto interrupted her. Then you can't force me to leave. Save your energies. Good night, doctor. Naruto nodded to her. She pursed her lips. Good night, Hokage-sama. She nodded tightly, then left them on their own. You should go home and rest, Naruto, Gara told him once they were alone. I don't need to be home to rest. I can rest here, Naruto told her. I don't know why you even want me to leave, but I'll warn you now, it won't be easy to convince me. Gara only sighed. Sleeping on a chair isn't comfortable, she pointed out quietly. Naruto grinned. And who told you I'll sleep on a chair? That bed looks big enough for all 4 of us. Gara studied him silently. Then, she sighed and turned on her side, scooting over so he could lie by her. Come here, then, she invited softly. Naruto grinned. Let me put on some pajamas first. I'll be right back. He kissed her cheek, then walked into the small adjacent bathroom. You have pajamas here? You were planning on sleeping here all along? Of course, even if the boys were nice with us and came today, you would be still stuck here, and I wasn't about to leave the three of you alone. She felt calmer at his words. I think the doctors would have a lot more to complain about if you tried to stay in the NICU by their side. They can complain all they want. I doubt they'll even be able to find my clone there. A small smile curved Gaara's lips. 6 hours later, Naruto was sound asleep holding her. But Gaara was still wide awake. Whatever the new medicine was doing to her, it had very successfully removed her ability to sleep. At least Naruto was comfortable. And as she listened to his calm breath and heartbeat, she could ignore all the pains that were gradually worsening. Gaara glanced up when the door clicked open, to see a nurse peek into the room cautiously. When she saw Gaara was awake, she waved and walked up to her. Gaara found it strange, considering Dr. Hime had said no one would come check on her tonight. Good night, Kazekage-sama. Having trouble falling asleep? She whispered, attempting to keep Naruto from waking. It was pointless. Naruto had jolted awake as soon as the door had opened. He was just pretending to sleep. I'm not used to pain, she explained quietly. The nurse looked sympathetic. Contractions are terrible. Are you feeling anything other than that? Gaara watched her attentively. There was something wrong. She wasn't feeling malice from the woman, and neither was her sand, but there was something off with her. After watching her for a few seconds, Gaara concluded she seemed nervous for some reason. I'm feeling a lot of pains, some headache, some nausea, she reported slowly. From what she had read about, contractions weren't amongst what she was feeling. The nurse's eyes flickered to the monitor, and Gaara glanced over her shoulder at it almost reflexively. She started when she saw some of the previous blue numbers looked alarmingly red. Just as she did, her heartbeat, which had been blue, went up in a few seconds and looked bright red as well. The nurse let out a sigh and reached to flick the room's light on. Please don't panic, your doctor has already been summoned. I came here to wake you up more gently, she explained, doing something to the 4-line that made it stop dripping so she could inject something else inside the line. Whatever that medicine was, it made her feel extremely ill. I don't feel well, she panted. The woman quickly grabbed a bucket from the floor and held it up. If you feel the need, Gaara sat up quickly and grabbed the bucket, tearing the mask away from her face. Naruto was up in an instant by her side as she began to heave. What did you give her? Naruto demanded. This has been prescribed to control her high blood pressure. Sometimes, it does cause some nausea. Naruto squeezed her shoulder, then glanced at the monitor. Another nurse rushed into the room seconds later, and the doctor Gaara brought from Suna was hot on her heels. Gaara couldn't focus on what they were saying. Her ears were ringing, there were black spots swimming in her vision. She felt Naruto squeeze her hand, and then she was being forced to lie down. When she was able to focus again, her doctor had her shining hands over her chest. Naruto was staring down at her, his face pale. Everything is under control now, the doctor said calmly. But Gaara could tell she was nervous. Should we keep her on the hormones? The first nurse inquired. Yes, I've already healed her. Call me again if her condition changes. Despite her words, she didn't leave. She helped Gaara wear the mask once again. Then she rested her hands on Gaara's lower abdomen and began to examine her. She looked even more worried. She left with the nurses, giving them both other instructions as they walked away. Gaara, are you all right? Naruto's voice shook. Yes, I'm fine now, she tried to reassure him. But her own voice was shaking. She was feeling weak. Naruto didn't believe her words. Do you want to try and sleep a little? She nodded silently. Naruto laid down again and pulled her into his arms. This time neither of them fell asleep. He held her silently, caressing her hair. After half an hour, he whispered, Can't sleep? No, she whispered back. Do you want me to heal you? Naruto asked softly. Her doctors had clearly told him not to heal her in any circumstances earlier. Gaara hesitated, then shook her head. No, I'll be fine. Naruto sighed loudly, but didn't say anything. He didn't fall asleep again, but he remained quiet for the rest of the night to give her the chance to sleep. Sometimes he would ask her how she was feeling, but he stopped doing that when she closed her eyes and evened her breathing. At least until morning came. He had left to go to the bathroom, and then he opened the curtains to let the light of the rising sun in. When he returned to her side, he took in a sharp intake of breath. Gaara? What? She asked, startled by his tone of voice. Looking into his eyes, Naruto looked even more horrified. He reached over and slapped the nurse call button. Gaara watched him in alarm. Naruto, what's it? She glanced at the machine that was monitoring her vital signs, and nothing was red like it had been during the night. The digits looked blurry, no matter how much she blinked. "Yo, you look bad," Naruto stuttered, taking her hand and lifting it up into her line of sight. She glanced at it, but she couldn't see what Naruto was seeing past the blur and black spots in her vision. The nurse that came in was still the night nurse, one of the few her San didn't act out around. "Is something the matter?" "Something's wrong with her." The nurse came up to her and examined her eyes. Then, she placed a hand on her side, right on the place where she had been in the most pain all night. "Are you feeling pain here?" "Yes," she agreed. "I'm going to contact your doctor, don't worry," she said in a soothing voice. "But what's this?" Naruto demanded. "Jaundice, likely caused by problems in the liver. Your doctor will check on it." She fiddled with something on the machine, then left the room. Gaara struggled to sit up, then looked at her arms again, trying to see what was wrong. "You're squinting," Naruto noted shakily. Gaara looked up at him, silent. "You're having trouble with your eyes?" She hesitantly nodded. She could see the wheels inside Naruto's head turn as he stared at her. She started when he suddenly began to shine gold, after communing with Kurama. "Naruto. Don't. I'm not letting them kill you just because." He began angrily, but was interrupted by the opening of the door. Her doctors were there, and Tsunade was with them. Tsunade narrowed her eyes. "Did you heal her, Naruto?" she demanded. "No, but I'm going to." Look at his sentence was interrupted by a squeak when Tsunade slapped the back of his head. "We need to know what's happening. We can't tell if you heal everything before we see it, idiot." Tsunade turned at her and narrowed her eyes. "Jaundice. She can't see well, either," Naruto told her. Dr. Hime walked up to Gaara and rested her hands on Gaara's stomach. "You're not dilated, and you're not having contractions. Did you remove the mask during the night?" "No." The doctor pressed her lips and nodded. By her expression, she didn't believe Gaara, but she probably didn't dare antagonize her in front of Naruto. All three doctors silently examined her. Gaara wasn't sure why Tsunade was there, but both doctors seemed to respect her lead, and under her charge they were both silent. They didn't discuss anything of their exams in front of them. "We will be back in a few minutes," Tsunade told them. They probably wanted to talk on their own. "You've seen what you wanted to see. Can I heal her now?" Naruto demanded. Tsunade sighed. "Do that, brat. She'll look yellow for a while, even after she's healed." With those words, they left the room. Naruto sat by her side and cupped her temples. Looking her in the eyes, she relaxed when his touch began to soothe her pains slowly at first, and then they suddenly just disappeared. "Is your vision working now?" Naruto asked once he backed away. She glanced at her arm, and started when she saw her skin looked yellow. "Yes, my headache stopped, too." Naruto narrowed his eyes. "You didn't tell them you had a headache." At his words, a clone of his materialized in the air and left the room. "What else didn't you tell them?" Gaara licked her lips. "I'm not hiding anything. I'm just feeling tired. It's been a long time since I spent the night awake without consequences," she explained softly. Naruto sighed and caressed her forehead. Nurse Ki knocked on the door, then walked in with a tray. "Time for breakfast?" Gaara grimaced. She didn't think she could stomach anything. At least the food was bland, and there wasn't much of it. She had heard Dr. Hime, as well as several of the nurses, complain that she was overweight. She had likely been put on a diet. She picked on the food slowly and tried to push some of it on Naruto, but he refused and forced her to eat until most of the food was gone. Only then she put on the mask once again and laid down on her back. "If you start feeling pain, you should warn me." Naruto ran his hand over her hair. She closed her eyes. "Women in labor are supposed," she began, but he interrupted her. "Don't finish that sentence. You know as well as I do that really hasn't worked for you so far." Gaara grimaced. "You haven't moved from this bed since they stuck all these wires on you. Don't you need to go?" Naruto glanced at the closed bathroom door. "No," she responded quietly. Feeling a little surprised herself, Naruto frowned. "Are you sure? Is that supposed to be normal?" She shrugged, uncomfortable. Naruto sighed and ran his hand over his hair. "Never mind." He walked up to her and settled on the chair by her bedside, the same place he had taken residence in since they had been led into that room. "You should go to the hospital's restaurant. Skipping meals isn't good for you." Naruto waved her off. "I'll have a clone bring something later. I'm not really hungry right now." She frowned, but accepted his words. A knock on the door sounded about 15 minutes later. She was curious, because none of the doctors would knock, and she had no idea who could be by the door. "Come in," he called. "Hey Naruto, I brought you food." It was Sakura. He gladly accepted the sandwich she had wrapped up for him, despite his earlier claim that he hadn't been hungry. You okay? She wondered, looking between Naruto and her, and doing a double take, probably because of the color of her skin. Naruto didn't look well at all. He was still frightened from earlier. She doubted he had gotten a restful night. The medicine to induce labor doesn't seem to be working, she told her with a shake of her head. It nearly killed her. Instead, several times, Naruto waved towards her. Sakura walked up to her and touched her side, where she had been feeling pain before, and her hand began to shine. I've already cured her, but still. Sakura's eyes narrowed. You cured her? Are you sure? She asked slowly. In an instant, Naruto was by their side, his skin once again shining golden. Once again, Naruto used his chakra on her, and she was worried about the blank look on his face. As soon as he was done curing her again, he reached up and tore the 4 tube off the medicine bag, then the tube that connected her mask to the oxygen. Naruto! Sakura cried out, and quickly reached out to close the tubes attached to her arm, then the oxygen outlet. The blood that had started leaking into the torn cannula froze in place. Are you crazy? Yes, I'm crazy, and those doctors know shit about what they should be doing, Naruto told her angrily. Sakura pressed her lips shut, seeming angry and sad at the same time. Naruto, liver failure is a symptom of her illness. It's just a sad coincidence that it's only happening now, but cutting off the meds won't stop it, Sakura explained quietly. We will see, Naruto told her stubbornly. Sakura glared at him and eyed the leaking medicine bag. The way Naruto had torn the tube, it couldn't be put back together. That was probably his exact intention. Sakura eyed the nurse call button, but in the end, she didn't press it. It's not like they're even working. I was reading about this. Inducing kunoichis is supposed to be very hard, especially powerful ones like Gara, she explained hesitantly. Gara frowned. Hard how? She asked warily. No one had told her about this. You have to try several methods until you find one which works. In most cases, none work and a surgery must be performed. Sakura hesitated. Inducing someone in your condition is really dangerous. If they could, they would have chosen surgery right away. No one thought it was important to mention that. Naruto looked even angrier. Sakura sighed. I just came to see how you were doing, but I have a prenatal appointment in half an hour. I'll bring you lunch later. Naruto nodded once. Thank you, Sakura, he told her quietly. She gave him a small, tight smile. Her smile softened when she turned to Gara. Get better, I'll come back later. She waved, then left. Naruto, we should call the nurse to put the mask back in place. A stubborn look crossed his face. No, I want to test my theory. First, staying half an hour without it won't make a difference. If it hasn't had any effect over you the whole night, he told her strongly. She sighed, and didn't argue. Without the mask, she felt even more tired than before. It was as if what was being given to her was actually something to keep her awake, and now that it was gone, she needed sleep. She tried to push the feeling away as Naruto sat by her side and she lied down once again. But the feeling became worse and worse, until she was coming alarmingly close to crashing. Trying to keep awake was one of the worst feelings she felt in her life. Gara, are you feeling sick? Naruto wondered, worried. I'm really exhausted. I need sleep, she told him softly. Fighting sleep actually hurt her. His eyes narrowed, and he glared at the dripping medicine bag. They were softer again when he looked at her. Sleep. I'm right here, watching over you. Gara nodded silently and closed her eyes. She fell asleep almost as soon as her eyes closed. When she woke up again, she felt disorientated. She tensed, anxious. When she found herself in a dark place that wasn't the hospital, it took several seconds for her to realize she was in Naruto's bed, at his home, and the lights were off. She slowly sat up. You're awake, Naruto sounded relieved. He was sitting at his table, several papers strewn over the tabletop. He didn't seem to be working. It was too dark. He had been looking out of the window. Is it night? Gara looked at the window confused. I'm not in the hospital, am I dreaming? No, you just slept the whole day away. They gave up inducing you. You were fighting it, Gara frowned. Fighting? Naruto stood and walked up to her. He was wearing his pajamas trousers, but his chest was bare. Yes, they analyzed all the stuff the monitors got off you, and the examinations they did, and they concluded that your body was overworking, fighting the attempts to induce. That was why you couldn't sleep. And you stopped healing yourself. Your chakra was hurting you. After I took you off the meds, your condition didn't worsen again. Gara's eyes widened. They gave up? she asked quietly. They tried the chakra induction again. Your sand was even more vicious while you were asleep. It pushed even Tsunade away. It came to a point they couldn't get 2 steps from you without the shield going up. They gave it up and told me to take you home so your shield would return to a resting state. She looked to the gourd in the corner, as he motioned towards it. Through all this, she hadn't woken up once, despite the fact she was a ninja with very light sleep. Gaara watched him in silence for several seconds. Naruto looked exhausted and sad. She reached out for him, and reading what she wanted from her body language, he held her against his chest. Gaara held him close, taking in his scent. They wanted to try again tomorrow. I refused. Gaara bit her lip. After what Sakura said, he sighed. But you have the right to try it again, if you want. She silently shook her head. I'm sorry, she whispered against him. A rush of air left Naruto's lips. She wasn't sure, but it sounded like a failed chuckle. They sat in silence for a long time. It was Naruto who broke the silence. You never gave them a name. She bit her lip. She didn't want to. Part of her had put thought to it despite herself, and she knew what she wanted to name them as soon as he asked again. Yukio and Uraku, she murmured. Naruto squeezed her closer and chuckled. Uraku's the little taijutsu master? She smiled faintly and nodded. Matching names, I like them, Naruto said softly. Promise me you will tell them I love them? She asked in a whisper. If she didn't give birth soon, their chances of survival would drop, but hopefully the Konoha medics would work a miracle for their beloved Hokage. Naruto didn't say anything for a long time. She had given up on hearing a response when Naruto whispered, I promise. She relaxed against him, her lips curving into a smile. She had been so tired that, despite sleeping away a whole day, she still managed to fall asleep inside Naruto's arms at night. When she woke up next morning, the sadness that had shrouded Naruto the previous night was gone. It was completely gone. Naruto looked happier than she had seen him in a very long time. His mood befuddled her. She wondered if it was a mask, but if it was, she was unable to read past it. Ever had a picnic? Naruto asked as she stood by the kitchen door, watching him in confusion. No, she replied quietly. He turned around and grinned at her. We're having one today, she nodded slowly. He was packing food already. I have the perfect place for it, if you want to get dressed. I need to let my council know my attempt to induce labor failed. There. A flicker of another feeling. But it was gone with a blink, so his happiness was a mask. Gaara wasn't sure what to think of that. They already know, I told them. Don't worry about that. Naruto waved a hand towards her. Don't worry about anything. I probably need to return to the hospital. We can't just pretend nothing happened, she sighed. Dr. Mieko wants you to return tomorrow evening, or as soon as you recover your energies if you're still tired by tomorrow. Having your sand on attention all the time's bad for you, she frowned. Is that why I was released from the hospital yesterday? Yeah, when you wouldn't wake up no matter what they did. Dr. Mieko was worried they were putting too much strain on you. She gave you medical orders to relax today, so you're going to do nothing but sleep and be lazy. She didn't think she could sleep anymore. Good thing she wouldn't have to argue with him to get out of bed. It seemed Naruto already had plans to relax her outside. She didn't feel like doing anything else. She was fine humoring his idea. She walked up to him and peered at the food he was packing. He had cooked it. She could see dirty pans over the cooktop. Are you a clone? She wondered curiously. Nope, I'm the one and only, he told her with a grin. She pursed her lips. You haven't gone into work today? He only hummed in response, but she couldn't divine an answer from the sound, except for the fact he was avoiding her question. You've sent a clone to work, she guessed, disapproving. He dropped what he was doing and placed his hands on her shoulders. I'm kind of in vacation, so that doesn't matter. Go get dressed. He lightly pushed her away. With a sigh, she left him and went to do as he had asked. While she dressed, she tried to guess what was going on inside Naruto's head, but for the life of her, she couldn't. Did he think that seeing him sad would make her more stressed? That didn't make any sense. Ready? He asked when she walked into the kitchen again. Fully dressed, she nodded in agreement. He walked up to her and took her hand into his, interlacing their fingers. In a gush of wind, they were in a glade somewhere. Naruto moved to stretch a table towel over the ground, then he threw a pillow on the floor. Sit here, he motioned. She wasn't going to stand from so low without effort nor without conscious help of her sand, so she hesitated. After taking a look around them, she sighed and perched herself on the pillow slowly. With a lot of help from the sand from her dissolving mini-gourd, Against medical orders, she left her sand armor over her face so Naruto wouldn't see how pale she was that morning. She watched him silently as he set up the picnic. Still wondering why he was doing all of this, she didn't ask. But after a while, he decided to tell her, "You know it's a custom in Konoha, when a girl is in love with a boy, for her to make him food and invite him to a picnic." Oh, she looked at the food once again. It was all healthy: rice, bread, fish and vegetables, and no fruits. He had paid more attention to the nurse's complaints on her weight, and what she should be eating than she had given him credit for. Gara was wary about losing weight. She had gained 22 kilograms more than her normal weight so far, but her doctor had told her the twins were underweight. If they weren't getting enough nutrition now, what good eating less was going to do for them? Dr. Mieko hadn't told her to lose weight, only Dr. Hime had. "We're married, and about to be parents, but we never had a date. I thought it would be nice to have one," he explained, and she offered him a small smile. This seemed to genuinely cheer him up, and he offered her a grin that didn't seem forced. "I never went on a date, what am I supposed to do?" she asked quietly. Naruto reached over and placed a bite-sized sandwich slice on her hand. "You're supposed to relax and have a lot of fun," he replied without hesitation. She took a bite from the food. The seasoning wasn't strong, but her stomach had been weak lately, so that suited her just fine. She blinked, startled, when she heard the click of a camera, and looked up to see Naruto had taken a photo of her. She looked askance at him. His mask broke for a moment, and her throat tightened at the sadness in his eyes. Wouldn't want Yuki-chan and Yuri-chan to ever forget how beautiful their mother is. A small blush heated her cheeks under her sand armor, and she smiled at him. Before she could blink, he was taking another picture. "Oh, wow. Such a big smile. That one is worth gold." "Naruto," she mumbled, embarrassed. "You're always so serious and proper in your pictures. It requires someone with my awesome skills to get one of you smiling." He moved over and plopped by her side, wrapping his arm around her shoulders. She blinked as the camera was held in front of them, and he took a photo of them together. He brought the camera near them and pouted when he saw he had cut off half of his face and her chin. "That wasn't very efficient," she noted. Naruto scoffed. "I'll show you efficiency." A shadow clone popped into existence, and Naruto threw him the camera. Then, he turned around and his fingers dug into her sides. She gasped in surprise, then squirmed under his fingers, because she was extremely ticklish when her sand armor wasn't protecting her skin. Her treasonous sand shield wasn't shielding her from him. "I won't surrender until you laugh." Naruto. His name sounded more like a strangled whine coming from her lips rather than the admonition she meant. He found a spot on her stomach that was unbearably sensitive, and an unflattering snort escaped her lips. He grinned and exploited that spot until she burst out laughing, hard enough that her eyes filled with tears. When he finally stopped, she sagged, feeling weak. He pulled her into his chest, and they lied together against the cool ground. "You're a bully," she told him breathlessly. "But now I have a photo of the stoic Kazekage laughing. That's certainly worth silver from the moon," Naruto boasted. She smiled against his chest, and heard another click of a camera. Glancing up, she saw his clone smirking at her. "Naruto, you're an odd man," she told him with a small shake of the head. "And you're an odd woman. We're a good match for each other," Naruto remarked. Before she could say anything, Naruto brought a mini rice ball to her lips and held it there, until she accepted it. She took the offering after a few seconds, and Naruto reached to eat something himself. What are typical dates in Suna like? Naruto wondered. For some reason, Gara didn't think that was an idle question. "I think they like going out to eat together at night," she pondered, trying to remember what she had listened to while spying on her idling ninja. "I don't mean what real dates are like, more like I don't know, what do little girls do when they have a crush?" Gara blinked, and hummed as she summoned her memories. "They light candles," she said lightly. "Huh?" Naruto peered down at her. Before I became Kazekage, when people stopped fearing me, lit candles started appearing on my doorstep and under my window." Kankuro laughed when he saw them, and Temari explained later that someone was in love with me. "If you like a girl back, you're supposed to place the candle inside a lantern to protect the flame from being extinguished by the sand and wind. If you don't, you blow the flame out," she explained. "Deep," Naruto muttered. "It doesn't really work. As far as communication goes, I would always extinguish the flames with my sand, but they would reappear lit up again next morning." Naruto burst out laughing then. "You're a heartbreaker," he teased. "I didn't even know who was lighting them up. They would hide themselves under disguises and genjutsus. She gave a little shrug. She accepted the new bite of food Naruto gave her. But if a guy likes a girl, he'll give her colorful shawls. Shawls? Naruto hummed. Girls give hand-crafted scarves to guys they like in the Rinne festival, too. What does a Konoha guy do when they like a girl? She wondered. How Naruto stuttered, then his silence stretched. You're a heartbreaker, too, she teased. Naruto had girlfriends, yet he didn't know what he was supposed to do to express his love towards them. I'm not. They're supposed to give them flowers, I guess, chocolate, too, but it doesn't really sound as special as receiving homemade food, Gara hummed. That's because you're a man. She closed her eyes when Naruto reached up to caress her cheek. The ground wasn't the most comfortable place to lie on, but inside Naruto's arms, she could easily fall asleep. Do you like flowers? Naruto wondered. I like plants, but I like them when they're alive, not flowers in special. I've always been fond of cacti. Naruto's hand slid down to cup her stomach when their most active son started moving. I like plants too, I love gardening, but I never really had a place with space for a nice garden. Gara placed her hand over his. I really like gardening too. I have a cacti garden back in Suna. Naruto started at her words. Really? I didn't know that. We have a hobby in common then? She smiled and nodded. Man, I really need to get a bigger house with a garden. You need to teach me how to grow cacti. Konoha's soil has too much water, it would kill them. You can plant them in pots. Gara silently agreed. We will plant flowers too, and a tree. She didn't say anything so she wouldn't break the comfortable moment, but she really didn't have the time for that. We can start tomorrow. Her eyes widened, and she moved until she could stare up at him. Tomorrow? She wondered. Yeah. I mean, I have to get a house first. My apartment isn't big enough for 2 boys anyways. Will you help me get a nice house? Gara watched him warily. He was going to waste money on a bigger house to potentially live alone in it. But she couldn't force the words past her lips when he looked back into her eyes. All right, she whispered softly. I'll buy it for you. He blinked. I can do it. She placed her fingers over his lips. It's a gift. You can keep your apartment too, since it's likely closer to the Hokage Tower than any house we might find. His eyes darkened. She didn't need to tell him she expected he would be living there on his own in a couple of months. He leaned in and kissed her lips suddenly. She closed her eyes and kissed him back. It felt uncomfortable for a brief moment as they changed positions. But then her sand trickled in under them and created a bed for them both. Naruto parted away and watched her with half-lidded eyes. Your sand is kind of useful for making out on the woods, he whispered with a grin. She scoffed and slapped his shoulder lightly. She started when a straw was pushed against her lips, and looked over her shoulder to see his clone holding out a glass of water. She silently accepted it. Gara wasn't sure whether Naruto had been serious or not, so she was a little surprised when he dragged her out to see houses for sale the next morning. His clones had apparently spent the whole of the previous day hunting for the places he liked. Now he wanted her opinion. She watched him closely as they visited each house. She knew exactly which house she was going to like when she saw his eyes lit up as he talked about the next place they would see. This one has a pretty nice view of Konoha. It's over the Hokage mountain, he explained. It was a new apartment then. Most of the buildings over the mountain range had been built less than 4 years ago. Won't it be kind of far from the Hokage Tower? She wondered. As answer, Naruto wrapped his hands around her waist, and they appeared in one of the new streets in a gush of wind. A couple of people who had been walking by looked at them startled, and Gara raised an eyebrow at Naruto. Do you have your seal on every light post in the village? Pretty much, Naruto agreed with an impish grin. You can't say much, you have your sand all over your own village. She had to concede that. Naruto led her towards one of the smaller streets, and at one point it became beaten ground instead of concrete. As they walked, the rocky ground gave way to grass for some reason. Gara didn't find it surprising that Naruto's favorite house was apparently in the middle of one of the small copse of woods above the mountain. It was a surprisingly old house. It was made of wood and rice paper, but she could see seals everywhere, and she suspected that house was stronger and more resistant than most cement houses that were being built lately. This house has a story, she guessed aloud, realizing there was likely a special reason for Naruto to be so excited about it over the others. The house was isolated from everything. And though it was beautiful, it was definitely not a practical place to live in. Although the house didn't seem severely damaged to the point of being unlivable, it was also in a very serious state of disrepair. Of course, all of them do, Naruto agreed with a chuckle. He understood what she meant, though, And after a short silence, he continued, "My dad used to live here, before he went to live with my mom." He finished. She looked at it again in a new light. "Oh, I thought his house was destroyed by pain," she whispered. "The house my parents lived in when I was born was destroyed. I didn't even know this one existed before. Kakashi told me about it 20 minutes ago, when I told him we were hunting for a place to move in. He said this house was left for me in Dad's will, but it seems the people who were supposed to warn me when I turned 20 never bothered to. Everyone else who knew thought I already knew about it." They walked up the stone path, and by the way Naruto was looking around, it was clear he was seeing it for the first time too. She stood by his side as he fiddled with the keys for the front door, looking at the front porch. Trees had encroached next to the house through the years it had been abandoned, but instead of giving it a neglected aura, Gara actually liked it. She loved plants. Being amongst them made her feel surrounded by life. Even the wood from the building felt alive, humming with chakra when she touched it with her sand-covered fingers. The seals on them probably caused the sensation. They peered into the building. Naruto tried the lights, but unsurprisingly they were cut. The house was filled with dust, and the furniture was covered with gray sheets that once had probably been white. "Tatame. But we probably shouldn't take off our shoes," Naruto mumbled. Gara lifted her hand and the dust in the room responded to her chakra. Her sand left the small gourd attached to Naruto's waist and washed over the floor, gathering the dust in its midst and turning it part of itself. "Don't do that!" Naruto squeaked in panic. "I've already done it. It's fine to take off your shoes now," she pointed out, removing her shoes and stepping onto the impeccably clean tatame. "Oh wow, that's really useful. But please don't do that again." Naruto followed her. She ignored his words. The first room looked like a sitting room of some sort, but it wasn't, because there was a bigger sitting room with actual furniture when they walked past one of the doors. There were closed doors to what she realized was a sizable inner garden. Her eyes widened when she saw there was a pond in there, dirty and neglected, but full of water. "A pond," she whispered. Naruto chuckled by her side. "That's like a gold mine in the backyard for a Tsunagai, eh?" He grinned, grabbing a stone and throwing it on the murky water. She didn't need to ask him why he had done that. The ripples in the water didn't match the fall of the stone. "It has fish in it. I'll need to clean that. It's surprising they're even alive." "That's a cherry tree, and that's a mulberry tree. Maybe they feed off the fruits that fall on the water," Gara suggested quietly. "I have no idea what fish eat, but I don't think they eat fruits." He left the small garden and walked around. As Gara expected, each of the 4 rooms and the kitchen had windows to the inner garden, but the windows to the outside of the house were only along the corridors. It was the design of a ninja's house, especially since there were warding seals drawn on each of the windows. After they had toured the house, they left to the back garden, and that was where the nice view Naruto had talked about was supposedly in. They could see the lower part of Konoha stretching over the horizon. From their position, Gara guessed they were probably somewhere far to the right of the first Hokage's head. "This house is perfect," Naruto proclaimed, happily, "don't you think?" "Yes, you should have been told about it before you bought your bachelor pad," she noted, crossing her arms as she glanced over the woods around them. It sat in a deceptively open terrain, but her trained eyes could see several traps and seals on the trees. "It was a safe house. I really like it," she finished in a whisper, looking around the trees. This was the one thing she loved about Konoha. Even though she wasn't very fond of the weather the trees caused, colder days and humid air. "Awesome. I guess we don't have much planting to do, but the back garden needs to be tended, and the mess that is the inner garden. We can buy pots and fill that weird living room in the entrance with cacti." Naruto gestured excitedly. "I just need to clean the house and air it out a bit. I think we can move in by the end of the week. We'll probably have to throw away half the furniture. Konoha's humid weather isn't good on wooden objects." She wrapped her fingers around Naruto's hand as he took hers and pulled her back towards the house. "Nah, there are water seals to deal with that. Jiraiya was the one who taught me about them. I would expect he would teach Dad. Speaking of seals, I should activate the defenses around the house. Is there any way I can get some of your blood?" "If you're very patient, yes," she hummed. In her doctor appointment that evening, she discovered she had lost nearly 3 kilograms since her last weighting, right before they attempted to induce her, on top of all the physical symptoms. That showed how awry the attempt had gone. Naruto adamantly refused to try it again. Gara was hesitant. She wanted the children to survive, and their chances would diminish the more she waited. She quickly found out that it was impossible to reason with Naruto, especially when she wasn't sure of what she wanted to do herself. His priority seemed to be keeping her alive over anything else, and the doctor didn't seem convinced she would have better chances being forced to give birth than if she did so naturally. Both were apparently equally dangerous to her. As sometimes was the case with a kunoichi, surgery was the best approach. But even when she tried to have Naruto or herself cut the skin of her stomach as a test, it didn't work. Dr. Miyako passed her a list of things she should do, and things she couldn't do, to keep her as healthy as they possibly could manage. She was told not to go on diet. She was also told to double her intake of water. Naruto took her advice very seriously, and she gave up refusing the water he would give her on random moments of the day. It was the same as when he had discovered about her pregnancy. At least she didn't feel sick now like she had back then. If anything, the water actually made her feel more energetic, and even her quieter baby started moving around more often. The only drawback was that her ability to stay hours without going to the toilet had long been shot by pregnancy, and drinking so much water didn't help. She didn't leave Naruto's apartment often, unless he took her out. Sometimes Temari stayed with her, sometimes Naruto stood there silent, giving her space without leaving her alone. Neither of them accused her of brooding, but she hated it that it was exactly what she was doing. At any moment, when she started feeling too sad, Naruto would sit by her side and engage her in conversation, even when she was less than enthusiastic to talk with him. 5 days after he had first seen his father's house, Naruto's clones had already moved them in. They moved during the night and slept together on a very comfortable futon in the master bedroom. Gara stood by the front door, looking over the trees in the front garden. It had started to rain. It was drizzling, really, and seeing rain always fascinated her. "Hey Gara, what are you doing?" She glanced back, to see Naruto walking down the corridor, drying his hair. He had been showering, and she was supposed to be cooking breakfast. But she got distracted by the rain when she went to open the door to air the house out as they had done every day since they had first visited it. "I was distracted. I'll cook," she murmured, and left to walk to the kitchen. She paused when Naruto grabbed her hand. "What distracted you?" It's raining." "How funny, the sky isn't dark." She glanced around, seeing the wide-eyed surprise on Naruto's face, then glanced outside again. The sun was out and bright in the mid-morning. That wasn't unusual when it rained in Suna. But apparently it was in Konoha. "I wonder if we will get a rainbow." "I don't think so." The rain was too weak for them to see a rainbow. But even as she said the words, a booming sound made the air around them tremble, and all of a sudden more rain came pouring down, startling her. She wasn't thinking as she stepped forward and reached a hand out, and she watched in fascination as the downpour washed her hand. That didn't happen often in Suna. "The summer showers are starting," Naruto murmured. Then, he stepped out into the rain and grabbed her hand. "Come," he called cheerfully, pulling her under the rain. A gasp escaped her lips as her armor shied away from her face, and suddenly she felt cold under the heavy rain. She closed her eyes and turned her face up, letting the water drops caress her face as a smile turned up her lips. Naruto had gone quiet. She opened her eyes and squinted towards him through the rain, to see him watching her with a blank face. When he caught her looking, he offered her a small smile. He turned around and pulled her around the house, until they were completely out from under the tree covers, and able to see the sky in all its beautiful glory. "Have you ever stood under the rain like this, Gara?" Naruto asked cheerfully. "Yes, I did as a child. Every time it rained," she agreed quietly, glancing at the sky. "Eh? Really? I thought it didn't rain in Suna?" Naruto mumbled. She chuckled at him. "Of course it does." They were in silence for a few minutes. "Have you ever kissed under the rain?" She started at his words, and glanced at him. "No," she murmured. He offered her a half-smile, then turned her around and pecked her lips. He backed away, looking surprised. "You're soft." She closed her eyes as his thumb caressed her cheek. "Were you always using your sand armor while we—" He trailed off. He gasped. "You're blushing." "You've never blushed." The burning in her cheeks worsened at his words. Naruto burst out in laughter. "Naruto," she mumbled, embarrassed that he was laughing at her. "You're the only person who can pull off looking blank-faced and mortified at the same time." He pointed out. Still laughing, she huffed, and turned away from him, intent on ignoring him. He didn't allow her to. In a second, she was inside his arms, and he was kissing her deeply while his hand wandered under her shirt and caressed her bare back, causing shivers to rack her body. She had never been touched directly like that. It made her knees feel weak. "You were wearing your sand armor when we had sex, you sneaky." The sound that escaped her throat as Naruto ran his hand near the curve of her breast startled both of them, and made them freeze, staring at each other. Then, Naruto cupped her breast, which was bared under her nightshirt. "And Naruto, we're in public," she gasped. In a second they were in their bedroom in a rush of wind. "That's why you never allowed me to lick you," Naruto murmured, thumbing her nipple as he leaned in and licked her neck. She gasped, her fingers digging into his drenched shirt. "We can have sex," she reminded him. Hime said we should do it," Naruto whispered roughly by her earlobe, then he sucked it into his mouth. Gara squeezed her eyes shut, pressing her lips to muffle a moan. "I'm going to lick you all over." She shivered inside his arms at the promise in his voice. He did lick her, all over. When she felt like she couldn't stand anymore, he took her inside his arms and carried her to the futon, then proceeded to give her the most intense orgasm she had ever felt in her life. Once they regained their breaths, he spooned her. "Was I too rough?" he asked in a deep, satisfied voice. "No," she sighed, cuddling against him. "Talking so much does seem to have strengthened your tongue," she couldn't help but tease. His chest rumbled with a chuckle. "Hiding so much made you completely inept at controlling your blushes." Her cheeks warmed up, as if to prove his words. "You look even cuter when you come without your sand armor. Promise me you won't use it again while we're together like this?" He murmured, then kissed the back of her head. She offered him a smile. "If you promise to protect me in its place," he could tell she was just teasing, because he smirked and held her closer. "I'll wrap myself all around you just like it." A clone materialized and pressed her between them both. "Is that enough?" "Then I promise," she sighed, shifting until she was lying comfortably between them, and closed her eyes. Naruto nuzzled her cheek. "Are you going to sleep again?" "We should eat something first," he murmured. "I'll cook in a bit. It's comfortable here," she responded. "I cooked. Food is ready. Just tell me when you want to eat." She nodded silently. They spent half of the morning cuddling together. For the first time in 2 weeks, Gara felt contented in one of her silences. She didn't want to leave his arms, but she was sick and tired of staying in bed. "I think I'm going out today." "Great idea." Naruto sounded more excited than she thought he should be. But not before eating. He stood, then offered her his hands. Getting up from the floor on her own was just too much effort, so she accepted his help. He took a jar of water he kept in their room and gave her the 3rd glass of water that morning. She drank it without argument. "Do you have any plans?" "Not yet," she confessed. She just felt stifled, sudden as it was. Today probably wasn't the best day to feel restless, considering the rain. But as she arrived in the living room, she saw it was no longer raining. She frowned. Walking up to the doors that led to the inner garden and glancing at the sky, there was barely any clues in the sky that it had rained not long ago. "It stopped raining," she commented as she knelt by the low table. "Summer showers, they hit fast and hard, and then they're just gone. Great to catch you unaware on your way home," Naruto commented, guessing what she was finding strange. "You should take an umbrella, just in case. We don't want you to get a cold." She wordlessly agreed. Accepting the food he had served for them both since he had cooked this morning, he changed the subject and talked about other things for several minutes. But after a lull in the conversation, he returned to the subject of her outing. "Do you want to go for a swim? Or would you rather be alone?" Naruto offered. She frowned. "It's too cold for a swim," she trailed off when he raised an eyebrow at her. He was sitting across her, wearing no shirt, while she was wearing one of the long-sleeved cotton shirts her sister had gotten for her 3 days ago. The day had been warm yesterday, but the air had chilled after the rain. "I don't have a furnace in my stomach anymore." She felt a little defensive. Naruto grinned. "Well, we can visit the hot springs?" Gara grimaced. "Okay, too hot for that. How about, let's just go for a walk?" She interrupted before he could say anything else. "I've never really visited this side of Konoha." She had never really gone up the mountain range. There was really no reason for her to go. The Hokage Tower was on the lower part of Konoha. The Chunin exams and any other political event were also held down there. It was disrespectful to wander about a hidden village when you were a foreign ninja. But she was Naruto's wife now. She wasn't quite a foreigner. But a thought hit her. "Do people know I'm your wife?" Naruto's sour expression said everything, so his council had pulled a secrecy clause on him as well. "I guess I shouldn't be walking around then," she murmured. "Yes, you should. I've just not announced it. But it's perfectly fine if people see us out on a date and take their own conclusions. He forced a smile. Gara sighed. This kind of rumor will do you more harm than good without an official announcement. She shook her head. It won't be a rumor if I tell people we're together. His smile was predatory. She frowned, confused. My counsel wanted me to wait to announce our marriage. He trailed off. It doesn't matter why. They never said I couldn't personally tell people. You saw I told my friends. If anyone asks on the streets, we just tell them. It'll be better if we wear genjutsu, she sighed, knowing arguing against the idea of leaving at all would do her no good. He hesitantly agreed. But he didn't look happy about it. If ninjas caught them, especially from Hinata's family, they would at least find out what was happening before they started spreading rumors. Temari had bought her a few maternity clothes that didn't look glaringly feminine. She hadn't worn any of them but the pajamas. But when she made to wear Naruto's jacket as she usually did outside, he quickly took the garment from her. It's way too hot for you to walk around in that. Wear something else. He motioned to the dark green and black clothing her sister had brought. Soon as days are much hotter, she began. But he interrupted. And you were sweating buckets inside it. Come on, she sighed, and looked between the clothes. She reached for one of the dark green sets, but wrinkled her nose when she saw a pale green ribbon sewed on the front, over the line where the shirt flared to accommodate her stomach. Naruto reached out and tore the lace away. Here, all manly now. That's not it, she argued, miffed. But she wasn't sure why exactly she was against wearing those clothes outside. Naruto ignored her and reached into the underwear drawer she hadn't touched yet, removing a maternity bra from it and holding it out for her. She refused to take the piece of cloth. I don't need that. It's far more comfortable than wrapping them, I'm sure. Give it a try. She huffed but took the clothing and threw everything on the bed. She removed her shirt and pulled the bra over her head. But Naruto caught her hand. That's not how you wear them, he giggled. You're supposed to know this kind of stuff, not me. Gara just pursed her lips and held it to him. He undid a clasp and gave it to her again. She put her arms through the loops, then unsuccessfully tried to close the clasp in her mid-back. Is this supposed to be more comfortable? She ground out, trying to close the damn thing. Naruto just stood there, laughing and being unhelpful. She finally managed to close it, and once she had adjusted the clothing, it did feel more comfortable. But her breasts also looked much bigger than she was used to seeing. Gorgeous, Naruto said with a grin, offering her the shirt. She pulled it over her head, and though she half expected it to be too tight on the chest area, the shirt was just the right size. Naruto must have told her sister her size, because Temari had never seen her unbound. She pulled the loose black pants over her boxers, then looked down at herself. She looked strange, but she felt very comfortable. It feels comfortable, she admitted, hesitantly. You look gorgeous, Naruto told her with a grin. Too bad she didn't find anything on your colors. We can look for something ourselves, if you want? He offered, getting dressed. I suppose, she agreed quietly. She preferred earthy tones, even sandy tones, to wearing all black or green. Temari had a thing for giving her green clothes, though. She had several green shirts her sister had given her. It apparently looked good on her. Let's find a clothing store, then. I'm sure we can find one around here. For once, Naruto wasn't wearing all orange, but black pants and a blue shirt. She realized why when he just changed his face and hair color with the genjutsu. That was enough to make him look like a completely different man. She did the same. Being a female was enough to throw people off at the moment. They walked slowly, with no particular direction in mind despite Naruto's suggestion. She was curious to learn more about the neighborhood. As she had thought, it was mostly comprised of tall buildings, with the odd low ones that looked more like schools than houses. It had several parks and a few playgrounds, and there were stores or markets on the first floor of most of the buildings. Most of the people walking around were civilians. They didn't need to worry about their genjutsus being caught. Not that Naruto was worried. He hadn't even disguised his voice, and he seemed to have no compunctions talking with her around anyone who would hear. She softened her own voice so she sounded more like a woman. At around noon, they sat in a park bench and ate the lunch Naruto had packed for them. Even after eating, they stayed there for a little over an hour, resting, before resuming their leisure walk. They found a baby clothing store eventually. The babies don't have any clothes yet, Naruto remembered, surprised, as soon as he saw the store. They have the rompers Hinata bought for them. She had brought two, along with the sleeping gown she had gotten for Gara. Naruto scoffed. They can't wear the same clothes every day. If I've learned anything with Sasuke's kids, it's that babies are really messy. Come on, He took her by the hand and pulled her towards the store. Gaara soon realized why Naruto wanted to have a daughter. She was half thankful he hadn't gotten his wish. She wasn't sure she wanted their daughter to be his dressing doll. Even the store's attendant seemed thrown by them. Naruto was gushing over baby's dresses, while she stood stone-faced by his side. She took a bright orange shirt away from the shopping basket and returned it to the display. But, that's clothing for a toddler. A baby that huge doesn't fit inside my stomach, let alone two, she scoffed. How about? Her eyes widened as he raised one of the small orange sets. That's a dress, Naruto, she cut through his words. Well, you're a girl and dresses like a guy. She took the hanger from his hand and set it away. You're not cross-dressing our children, she snapped. Besides, they're newborns not. She looked at the marker. 6 months old, they're going to be small. We don't want them to drown in their own clothes. Sarada was born pretty big. She outgrew all her white clothes before her first week, Naruto pointed out. Twins are usually smaller. She took another hanger from his hand. No orange clothes. We're going to buy white only, she admonished. They're not going to wear white after their first week. He was pretty much whining. We'll worry about that later, come this way. She grabbed his hand and pulled him down the aisles until she saw one where there were only white clothing. As she expected, they were all newborn-sized. Konoha and Suna, as well as Kiri to her knowledge, shared the tradition to dress newborns in white clothes during the first week of their lives, 7 days, while they were still pure beings, closer to the holy than to the earth they'd been born into. What do you think about this? She showed him one of the most frilly clothes that looked like they could be worn by a boy, hoping Naruto wouldn't feel the urge to put them in a dress. It was premature-sized. Naruto squinted. It's cute, but this is way too tiny. No way that can fit a baby. She put it on the basket. It's going to fit them, trust me. Naruto looked skeptical, but he grabbed another pair of the same model and placed on the basket. Of course, she wasn't surprised he was going to match their clothes. Not after walking into this store with him and seeing him go crazy over baby dresses. She grabbed cotton rompers and pajamas, all of them light enough to be worn during the summer. Those are so plain, Naruto sighed sadly. They're more comfortable, too, she pointed out. He pouted, but he seemed to understand her point. They left the store with several bags containing clothes, toys and several other things one or both of them thought might be useful to take into the hospital for their birth. Naruto had brought orange clothes. Of course, and she hadn't argued too much. It would be a long time until they would grow big enough to wear them, though he didn't seem to believe her when she told him that Sasuke's children, it seemed, were far bigger than Matsuri's children when they were born. But she had been born small, and her siblings had been born small. She was sure her children would be small too. She really hoped they would.